Chapter 28. Life on the cloud boat was rather boring because there was no entertainment. Apart from playing with his younger sister, Yiling, Yi Xian was cultivating crazily every day. Now that he possessed the battle intent, he could easily defeat the shadow when he fought against it. Battle intent. Yi Xian did not know much about the battle intent that he had just comprehended. He only knew that if he were to activate this battle intent while fighting against the shadow, his combat strength would be greatly enhanced. Moreover, he would become stronger as he fought. This made him rather excited and agitated. The only pity was that it was not sword intent. If it was sword intent, it would mean that he was not a quasi-sword Dao Grandmaster, but a true sword Dao Grandmaster. Although he had comprehended battle intent, he could not be called a martial Dao Grandmaster. That was because he did not know much about the path of martial Dao Yi. Be it sword intent or battle intent, they were a symbol of a martial Dao Grandmaster and a sword Dao Grandmaster. However, it did not mean that one would be a martial Dao Grandmaster or a sword Dao Grandmaster after comprehending the battle intent and sword intent. There were many things that needed to be done. At this moment, he could only say that he had comprehended concepts that he should not have comprehended, and he had to go through the process in between. Of course, it was only a matter of time before he became a martial Dao Grandmaster. In other words, as long as he reached the Qi-controlling realm and could control Qi, he would be a martial Dao Grandmaster to a certain extent. As for how valuable it would depend on his understanding of martial Dao. No matter what, he was already satisfied this time. His sword heart was clear, and he had battle intent. What he wanted to do the most now was to fight in Lanxiao, who was dressed in white as snow. "You're not a match for that woman right now." The mysterious woman seemed to know what Yi Xian was thinking and said, "When that woman fought you previously, not only did she suppress her cultivation level, but she also suppressed some of her special abilities. In short, she's barely passable." Barely. Yi Xian's expression was rather strange. "Senior, is she barely passable in your eyes?" The mysterious woman said indifferently, "In my eyes, she's barely passable, but it's enough for her to look down on countless geniuses below the clouds." Yi Xian asked curiously, "Senior, were you very powerful in the past?" The mysterious woman said, "Guess." Yi Xian was speechless. The mysterious woman continued, "Kid, seeing that you're so good to your sister, I'll give you a few words for free. In this world, talent and physique are all fleeting clouds. Since ancient times, there had been many people who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the gods with their mortal bodies. The martial Dao, the sword Dao, and the myriad of Daos in this world have no end. Being talented and having a good physique will at most give you a slight advantage and allow you to walk further. However, whether or not you can continue walking on this path depends more on a person's perseverance and character." Yi Xian was silent. Perseverance? Temperament? He understood the former. He had relied on perseverance to survive until now with his sister. As for temperament, he didn't fully understand it. However, to him, he didn't care about right or wrong when he did things. He only cared about his heart. If you think it's right, do it. If you think it's wrong, don't do it. Nothing in this world goes as one wishes. It's enough to have a clear conscience. The mysterious woman's voice sounded again, "Now that you've comprehended battle will, you can learn more about the martial Dao. Don't waste this battle will. As for the martial Dao Yi, you can explore and learn it yourself." Yi Xian was taken aback. Then, he hurriedly said, "Senior, don't you understand the martial Dao?" The mysterious woman said, "It's not that I don't understand it, but I understand it too well. In the future, whether it's the sword Dao or the martial Dao, you need to explore and study it yourself. The only thing I can do for you is to guide you in the dark." When she spoke up to hear, she paused for a moment, and then she said, "The path that others have taken isn't your path, and don't try to imitate the path of others. Only the path that you've taken and the things that you've comprehended are truly yours. Just like the battle will, your previous choice allowed you to comprehend the battle will. But if I told you to do it, you wouldn't be able to comprehend the battle will. Most of the time, doing it on purpose will only backfire. Alas, I really don't want to explain these trivial things to you. Hurry up and join that whatever academy so that you don't have to bother me. Yi Xian was speechless. Yi Xian didn't disturb the mysterious woman because he understood what she meant. It was like climbing a mountain. Others said that climbing a mountain was tiring and difficult, but you wouldn't feel that way. Only when you tried it yourself would you realize where it was tiring and where it was difficult. It was the same for the martial Tao and the sword Tao. Only when he tried it himself would he deeply understand where it was difficult and where it was tiring. 2 hours later, Yi Xian left the prison pagoda. As soon as he left the prison pagoda, little fatty Lu Ming came to his and Yi Ling's room. Ever since Yi Xian displayed his invincible might in Two World City, little fatty Lu Ming's worship of Yi Xian had become a little crazy. He himself worshipped swordsmen. In addition, Yi Xian had stood out at that time. Yi Xian's image in the little fatty's eyes suddenly became great. Worship. Unparalleled worship. Little fatty was also very familiar with them. After entering the room, he carried a pile of fruits and placed them on the table in front of Yi Xian and his sister. Then he smiled and said, "Big brother, sister Ling, eat, it's delicious." Yi Xian and his sister looked at each other and smiled. At this time, Lu Xiaoran walked into the room. Lu Xiaoran cupped his fists at Yi Xian and said with a smile, "I hope I'm not disturbing you?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "Of course not. Senior Lu, please sit." Lu Xiaoran sat down, and the two little fellows sensibly retreated to the side. Lu Xiaoran said, "We'll reach the imperial capital in half a day." "Little friend, do you know anyone in the imperial capital?" Yi Xian shook his head. This time, he didn't know anyone in the imperial capital. Lu Xiaoran smiled slightly. The imperial capital is a mix of good and bad people. If you don't mind, you can stay in the accommodation I've arranged for you. After you enter Karaki College, you can choose whether you want to stay or leave. What do you think? Yi Xian thought for a while and then nodded. "Then I'll have to trouble you." He naturally wouldn't refuse Lu Xiaoran's kindness. As the saying goes, one more friend is one more path. Since the other party was so kind, why should he refuse? Seeing that Yi Xian agreed, Lu Xiaoran's smile on his face became even wider. He was the lord of a city and naturally had great power. The reason why he befriended Yi Xian was naturally because he valued Yi Xian's potential. Lu Xiaoran didn't stay for long and soon left with little fatty. Only Yi Xian and Yi Ling were left in the room. Yi Ling sat next to Yi Xian and said softly, "Brother, did you agree to be a general because of me?" Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling. Yi Ling said softly, "I asked little fatty. He said that a general is a very high official." "It's an official." "Brother, why are you so stupid? Why did you refuse?" Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. "What will you do if I become a general?" Yi Ling looked straight at Yi Xian. "I'm your burden, right?" Yi Xian shook his head. "You're the most important person in my life. For you, I can do anything, and I can give up anything." As he spoke, he held Yi Ling's little hand tightly. "Without you, even if I become a sword immortal, it's meaningless." Yi Ling's tears suddenly flowed down. She didn't say anything and just hugged Yi Xian tightly. After a while, Yi Ling felt sleepy and fell asleep. Greedy for sleep. Looking at Yi Ling on the bed, Yi Xian's face was as gloomy as still water. Yi Ling was even more greedy for sleep than before. Fortunately, with the celestial fire warmed jade, she wasn't that cold. However, her situation wasn't good because her face was getting paler. Although she usually didn't say anything, Yi Xian knew very well that she just didn't want him to worry. Yi Xian gently covered Yi Ling with a blanket and left the room to go to the deck of the cloud ship. At the bow of the ship, he looked up into the distance. It was almost dusk, and the sky was fiery red like a huge fire cloth. Under the setting sun, there were thousands of mountains. They were almost at the imperial capital. "Little friend." At this moment, Lu Xiaoran's voice sounded in his ears. Yi Xian turned his head, and Lu Xiaoran walked to his side. Lu Xiaoran said with a smile, "Looking at you, little friend, you seem to be in a hurry to get to the imperial capital." Yi Xian nodded. "Senior, can you tell me more about Kuraki College?" Lu Xiaoran nodded his head. "Kuraki Academy is not a power of the Jiang country, just like the Drunken Immortal restaurant, they are spread throughout the various countries, and the reason why they are so popular, other than having extremely powerful teachers and various cultivation resources, there is another reason, and that is because of their status. As long as you enter Kuraki College, it's equivalent to being labeled as a genius. In the future, you'll be recruited by various forces." As he spoke, he smiled. "Those who come from Kuraki College will be able to eat well no matter where they go. They might even be recruited by the imperial family. To the disciples of poor families, this is the shortest path to success. To the disciples of the imperial family and the aristocratic families, the identity of a student of Kuraki College is a form of protection. Moreover, entering Kuraki College allows them to make friends with many geniuses. After all, in the imperial capital, connections are the most important." Yi Xian nodded slightly, and as if he thought of something, he asked, "Is Kingdom Scholar and Lanxiu also from Kuraki College?" Lu Xiaoran shook his head, "And Guosher isn't from Kuraki College." Yi Xian was slightly astonished. "Why?" Lu Xiaoran smiled. "The dean of Kuraki College personally looked for An Guosher, hoping that she would join Kuraki College. However, I heard that she refused." "Refused?" Yi Xian was stunned. "Why?" Lu Xiaoran shook his head and smiled. "Because there's no mentor in Kuraki College that can teach her. It should be said that she's already qualified to be a mentor. Tell me, isn't it a little ridiculous to ask her to join Kuraki College?" Yi Xian was speechless. Lu Xiaoran continued, "However, although she didn't join Kuraki College still gave her the honor of being an honorary mentor. Although she doesn't have any real power, other than the dean and a few core members of Kuraki College, everyone else has to pay their respects when they see her." At this point, he paused slightly. "As far as I know, An Guosher's background isn't simple. However, this isn't something that we should care about." Yi Xian nodded, then asked, "Senior, I heard that Kuraki College has the best doctors, is that right?" Lu Xiaoran nodded. "I don't dare say that they have the best, but their treatment methods should be the best in Jiang country. Even the imperial physicians in the palace often go there to ask for advice, and some of the imperial physicians are even from there." Hearing this, Yi Xian's heart relaxed. He turned his head to look into the distance, and at the end of his line of sight, he could vaguely see a majestic ancient city, the imperial capital. Chapter 29. The imperial capital was the center of power in the state of Jiang, and it was the most prosperous place in the state of Jiang. Moreover, it was the place where countless young people chased after their dreams. The cloud vessel grew closer and closer to the imperial capital, and the city grew clearer and clearer within their fields of vision. Lu Xiaoran, who stood by Yi Xian's side, suddenly said, "Young brother Yi Xian, the imperial capital is filled with all sorts of people, so you have to be more tactful. Otherwise, there might be a lot of trouble." Yi Xian nodded. "I won't cause trouble." Lu Xiaoran shook his head and smiled. "I'm not afraid of you causing trouble, but this place is filled with all sorts of people. Even if I'm the governor of a city, I have to be careful here because I'm deeply afraid of offending someone I shouldn't." As he spoke, he gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Young brother Yi Xian, it's not enough to not cause trouble here. If it's possible, then make friends with more people. It'll be extremely beneficial to you. Make friends." Yi Xian nodded. He naturally understood the benefits of having more friends. The cloud vessel grew closer and closer to the imperial capital, and they were able to clearly see the appearance of the imperial capital from their current location. The imperial capital wasn't very large, and it had a population of around 1 million. Moreover, the city was very ancient. Obviously, it had a certain amount of history. However, it was extremely prosperous. They hadn't even approached the imperial capital when countless cloud vessels were entering and exiting the imperial capital from the surroundings. Yi Xian gazed at the scene in the sky and said in a light voice, "How bustling." Lu Shaoran smiled, "It'll be even more bustling once we enter." Yi Xian nodded. He was also a little curious about the imperial city in front of him. The cloud vessel suddenly stopped when it was around 3 kilometers away from the imperial capital, and then it descended slowly. There was an enormous river beneath the cloud vessel, and there were at least a few dozen cloud vessels parked there. It was a magnificent scene. Meanwhile, a voice resounded, "We've arrived at the imperial capital. Passengers, please prepare to disembark." Yi Xian turned around and returned to his room. When he noticed that Yi Ling was still asleep, he didn't wake her up, and he just carried her on his back and arrived on the deck. Glancing at Yi Xian, Lu Shaoran said with a smile, "Yi Xian, my young friend, let's go to my mansion first." Yi Xian nodded, "Then I'll be troubling you." Fatty Lu Ming immediately beamed when he heard Yi Xian's words. Because he had come to the imperial city alone, he was already bored. Now that he had 2 companions, he was naturally happy. The cloud ship slowly descended. Soon, the cloud ship steadily stopped on the river. A long ladder was erected at the edge of the cloud ship. Countless people walked down from the cloud ship. Yi Xian carried Yi Xian Yi Ling on his back and followed Lu Shaoran towards the city gates of Yi Xian. On the cloud ship, Han Xiangmeng looked at Yi Xian's back and said softly, "I'm afraid Karaki Academy won't be peaceful anymore." An old man beside Han Xiangmeng asked, "Young miss, why aren't you befriending him?" Han Xiangmeng shook her head, "I've already missed the best opportunity. If I try to befriend him now, I'll only be humiliating myself." As she spoke, she raised her head and looked at the imperial capital. "Only by joining Karaki Academy will I have a sliver of hope." At the gates of the imperial capital, Yi Xian looked at the city gates and sighed. Only now did he realize how small Qingqing was. The gates of Qingqing weren't even 1/10 the size of the city gates. This was a real city. Qingqing couldn't even be considered a city. After entering the city gates, Yi Xian's first impression was that it was huge. The road beneath his feet was at least 60 feet wide, and the surrounding buildings were arranged in a picturesque manner. There wasn't the slightest sense of blockage, and it was extremely comfortable to look at. The second impression was that it was bustling. The city was bustling with people, and if one spoke softly, it would be hard to hear them. At this moment, Yi Ling woke up as well. Yi Ling looked around in amazement, "Brother, this place is much livelier than our Qingqing." Yi Xian smiled, then looked at Lu Shaoran, "Senior Lu, where is Karaki Academy?" Lu Shaoran smiled, "Little friend, don't be anxious. There are still 10 days before Karaki Academy starts to recruit students. At this stage, Karaki Academy isn't open to the public, so there's no point in you going now. Why don't you stay in my residence first, then rest for a few days? When you're ready, you can go to Karaki Academy with my son. What do you think?" Yi Xian nodded, "Of course." Under Lu Shaoran's guidance, the group arrived at a large and luxurious residence. This was normal, since Lu Shaoran was the lord of a city. Lu Shaoran arranged a courtyard for Yi Xian and his sister, and even arranged for 3 maids. This made Yi Xian feel a little embarrassed. After entering the courtyard, less than half an hour later, Yi Ling fell asleep again. Yi Xian's heart instantly sank when he saw this scene. There were 24 hours in a day, yet Yi Ling might be sleeping for 18 hours. This was surely unusual. After he covered Yi Ling with a blanket, Yi Xian left the room and arrived at the courtyard. 10 days. Karaki Academy was where his hope lay now. However, he was still slightly worried because he hadn't attained the Qi-controlling realm yet, and the lowest requirement for Karaki Academy to recruit students was the Qi-controlling realm. He seemed to have thought of something and withdrew a white jade pendant. This was something Anlancio had given him, and if it really didn't work, then he could only use this jade pendant. Even though he really wanted to rely on his own strength to enter Karaki Academy. A spirit sword. Yi Xian knew that he had to start dealing with spirit swords once he entered Kuraki Academy. He was unlike others, and if he wanted to improve his cultivation, then he could only rely on devouring spirit swords. But how precious were spirit swords? Even if they existed, how expensive would they be? With his current net worth, he probably couldn't even afford a single strand of hair. Only now did he deeply understand how difficult it was for an ordinary person to cultivate. Yi Xian entered the prison pagoda. He didn't spar with the shadow, because the shadow was no longer a match for him. What he needed to do now was to truly grasp battle intent. He hadn't completely grasped this illusory battle intent. Time passed quickly, and in the blink of an eye, there were less than 2 days left until Kuraki Academy's recruitment. In the prison pagoda, Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly, and on his fists, a shapeless force vibrated ceaselessly. Battle intent. The current him didn't need to rely on a sword to determine life and death to be able to contend with a higher realm powerhouse. Now, he could rely on this battle intent alone to contend with a higher realm powerhouse. However, he didn't know if he could win. The only pity was that he didn't comprehend sword intent. Otherwise, he really wouldn't feel any pressure when facing a higher realm powerhouse. An hour later, Yi Xian left the prison pagoda because Lu Xiaoran had arrived at their courtyard. When he saw Yi Xian, Lu Xiaoran smiled and said, "Young friend, have you gotten used to living here recently?" Yi Xian smiled and said, "To be honest, my younger sister and I have never lived in such a good place." Lu Xiaoran roared with laughter. "Young friend, you really know how to joke. Right, there's a banquet tonight. If you have the time, you can bring your younger sister along with me." "A banquet?" Yi Xian was stunned, and then he asked, "What banquet?" Lu Xiaoran smiled and said, "A banquet hosted by the first prince of the imperial capital. Every time Kuraki Academy recruits, geniuses from all over the Jiang Kingdom will come to the imperial capital. The Jiang Kingdom's imperial family naturally doesn't look down on these geniuses. So, His Majesty the King will send a prince to receive these geniuses on his behalf." Yi Xian pondered deeply for a moment, and then he said, "It shouldn't be something that just anyone can attend, right?" Lu Xiaoran nodded. "Of course. Only those with status and strength are qualified to attend this banquet. Or perhaps, it should be said that those who are able to attend this banquet have a 100% chance of entering Kuraki Academy. Otherwise, the higher-ups wouldn't invite them." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Senior, I didn't receive an invitation." Lu Xiaoran said seriously, "Young friend, you can go with me. As for the invitation, I'll invite you. If it's possible, it's better to go. All the geniuses of this year are monstrous geniuses, and it'll be beneficial to you if you're able to make friends with some of them. What do you think?" Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded. Just as Lu Xiaoran had said, it wasn't bad to make friends with some people. After all, a swordsman didn't have to be alone. Moreover, he wanted to see the monstrous geniuses of the Jiang Kingdom. Lu Xiaoran nodded and smiled. "Then please prepare yourself. We'll set out in a moment." After saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian returned to his room. At this time, Yi Ling had also woken up. Yi Xian walked to Yi Ling and gently rubbed Yi Ling's cheek. He said softly, "Don't sleep later. Big brother will take you to eat and drink to your heart's content." Yi Ling blinked, and then smiled brightly. "All right." Yi Xian lightly scratched Yi Ling's little nose. "Quickly go wash your face. We'll set out immediately." Half an hour later, Lu Xiaoran left the mansion with Yi Xian, Yi Ling, and a group of people. Soon, they arrived at a restaurant in the center of the city. The Immortal Inn. The Immortal Inn could be said to be the largest restaurant in the imperial city. It covered an area of nearly 1,000 square meters. It had a total of 6 floors, and its exterior was covered in gold. It was extremely luxurious. And this restaurant was the property of the drunken Immortal Inn. Yi Xian and his younger sister were both struck dumb by the sight of the restaurant. They had never seen such a large and luxurious restaurant before. Not to mention them, even little fatty Lu Ming was a little shocked. There wasn't such a large restaurant in Thousand Mountain City. Seeing the three's expressions, Lu Xiaoran laughed. This isn't the biggest. In the future, you should go out and see more. You'll realize that the world is big and full of wonders. Yi Xian nodded. He deeply agreed with this point. Fortunately, he left Qing City. Otherwise, he would be a frog in a well for the rest of his life. Lu Xiaoran led the three into the Immortal Inn. A beautiful woman immediately came to greet them. Are you City Lord Lu? Lu Xiaoran nodded. The woman smiled sweetly. There's still half an hour before the banquet. The Crown Prince has already arranged some entertainment for City Lord Lu. Would City Lord Lu like to try it? Hearing this, Lu Xiaoran's old face turned slightly red. He hurriedly shook his head. No need. Bring me to see the Crown Prince. The woman nodded and led Lu Xiaoran and Yi Xian up the stairs. When they reached the 4th floor, Yi Xian and Yi Ling were stunned by the scene in front of them. The 4th floor was like a public square. It was very big, bigger than the entire Yi clan. It was extremely luxurious inside. It was resplendent in gold and jade. It was like a palace. Even the feet were paved with a thick layer of animal skin. It was very soft. It was extremely comfortable. Wow! At the side, little fatty Lu Ming suddenly stepped on the beast skin under his feet and exclaimed, Dad, this is the beast skin of the scarlet tiger. This beast skin costs at least several hundred gold coins, and there are at least tens of thousands of them here. Damn it, this drunken immortal restaurant is richer than our family. Hearing this, Yi Xian and Yi Ling looked at each other. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. Poverty has limited my imagination. Lu Xiaoran smiled. Young friend, this drunken immortal inn is as rich as a country. Even the royal family isn't as rich as them. As he spoke, he glanced into the distance and said, Young friend, please wait for a moment. I'll be back soon. After that, he quickly walked into the distance. At this moment, a young man walked over. The young man cupped his fists at Yi Xian. Brother, you've just arrived, right? Yi Xian nodded and cupped his fists in return. Just arrived. The young man smiled. I'm Yubu, the heir of the Yu family from River City. May I know who you are? Yi Xian smiled. I'm Yi Xian from Qingcheng. I'm an independent cultivator. An independent cultivator? The young man was slightly stunned. After that, he sized up Yi Xian and asked, You're an independent cultivator? Yi Xian nodded. Yes. The young man's expression turned cold. Sorry for disturbing you. After that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian was speechless. The young man walked to the side and cupped his fists at one of the men. I'm Yubu, the heir of the Yu family from River City. Brother, you are? The man cupped his fists in return. I'm Mo Xiao, the heir of the Mo family from Yu City. Hearing this, the young man was shocked. You mean the Mo family that owns dozens of gold mines? The man nodded. That's right. The young man pulled the man's arm and smiled. Brother Mo, we feel like old friends at first sight. Come, let's drink a few cups. P.S. Thank you to all the friends who have tipped and voted. During the new book period, every ticket is precious. Thank you for your support. Thank you sincerely. Pour tea for the big shots. Chapter 30. Yi Xian and Yi Ling were instantly stunned by this scene. A short moment later, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. It's still a familiar feeling. Actually, it was the same in Qing City. Only those who were valuable would be made friends with. Moreover, those who were valuable would only make friends with those who were valuable. Lu Ming, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke angrily, "Big brother, this fellow is a snob. Do you want me to stand up for you?" Yi Xian glanced at the little fatty, and then he shook his head and smiled. Birds of a feather flock together. It's very normal. The little fatty was about to say something when Lu Shaoran walked over, and there was a man in a yellow robe standing before him. The man was around the age of 25 or 26, had a handsome appearance, and carried a faint dignified aura between his brows. The man walked over to Yi Xian, and then he sized Yi Xian up and smiled. "This is brother Yi Xian." Yi Xian looked at Lu Shaoran, and the latter hurriedly said, "My young friend Yi Xian, this is the eldest prince of our Jiang kingdom, Jiang Niansheng." The eldest prince. Yi Xian was slightly stunned, and then he cupped his fists to the eldest prince, Yi Xian of Qing City. He was neither servile nor overbearing. The eldest prince nodded and smiled. "Since City Governor Lu thinks highly of brother Yi Xian, then we naturally have to get closer to him in the future." Yi Xian was about to speak when a slightly excited voice suddenly resounded, "Mo Suiqing is here." Mo Suiqing. When they heard this voice, everyone instantly looked towards the staircase. The first prince, who was in front of Yi Xian, also looked toward the staircase. He tidied up his clothes and walked over. Seeing this scene, Lu Shaoran wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not say anything. Naturally, he was on the first prince's side, and this time, he wanted to introduce Yi Xian to the first prince. In order to not arouse Yi Xian's disgust, he did not reveal too much about Yi Xian. Now that he saw the first prince's indifferent expression, he wanted to say a few more words. However, when he remembered that Yi Xian was a swordsman, he did not say anything. It would be fine if the referral failed, but if it caused Yi Xian's disgust, then the loss would outweigh the gain. Under everyone's gaze, a woman walked up the stairs. The woman was around the age of 20, and she wore a fiery red dress. Her figure was tall and extremely slender, and her appearance was extremely exquisite. She had beautiful brows and starry eyes, and her face was fair and delicate. Especially her eyes, they were large like the stars in the night sky, and a single glance at them seemed to be able to cause one to fall into them. She was very beautiful. Even Yi Xian took a few more glances at her. He wouldn't reject beautiful things, but it was just pure appreciation. As for other thoughts, he didn't have any. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze and looked at Lu Shaoran. "Senior, this is?" Lu Shaoran smiled. "Mo Suiqing, the number one beauty in the imperial capital." The number one beauty in the imperial capital. Yi Xian was stunned, and then he said instinctively, "Where's in Lanxiu?" Even though the woman before him was drop-dead gorgeous, it would be going too far to say that she surpassed in Lanxiu. Lu Shaoran smiled. Guesher isn't renowned in the 100 Kingdoms by relying on her appearance, and the impression others have towards her isn't based on her appearance as well. Young friend, do you understand? Yi Xian came to an understanding when he heard this. As soon as Mo Suiqing arrived, the gazes of everyone here converged onto her, and they surrounded her like a host of stars surrounding a bright moon. Lu Shaoran, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke abruptly. Mo Suiqing isn't just beautiful, she's from the Mo clan. It's an ancient clan that even the imperial family fears. Presently, the two princes of the kingdom of Jiang are fighting for the position of crown prince, so if one of them is able to marry her, then the position of crown prince would be practically secured. Unfortunately, Mo Suiqing's standards are extraordinarily high. She once said that no man in the kingdom of Jiang is worthy of her. Meanwhile, Yi Ling, who stood by Yi Xian's side, spoke abruptly. "I think my older brother can do it." Yi Xian rolled his eyes at Yi Ling. "Big brother is only a treasure in your heart, but I'm probably nothing in the eyes of others." Yi Ling smiled sweetly and held tightly onto Yi Xian's arm. In her heart, her older brother was worthy of anyone in the world. Lu Shaoran roared with laughter. "Don't belittle yourself. You're young and promising, so anything is possible if you have the heart." He didn't know who was behind Yi Xian, but he knew something about Dao Yi. Yi Xian had killed an elder of the Immortal Indulgence Inn and survived. After that, Tower Master Han had died. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He glanced at Imo Sui-ching, who stood in the distance. Women like her were arrogant and had extremely high standards, so he wouldn't go looking for trouble with her. In his opinion, the relationship between two people should be based on feelings and character. Even though talent and potential were necessary, it would be meaningless if a relationship was built on talent and potential, as well as family background. It was like saying that you only love me if I have money, and you don't love me if I don't have money. What was the point of such love? The banquet started. Yi Xian and his sister, Yi Ling, Lu Xiaoran, and little Fatty sat at a table alone. The table was filled with all kinds of dishes, and there was an endless stream of them. The siblings and little Fatty ate happily. He and his sister were used to a hard life, so they had never eaten delicacies before. As for little Fatty, he was just a glutton. The people around them were either making friends or toasting each other. Only their table was eating crazily. Seeing this, Lu Xiaoran shook his head and smiled bitterly. However, he couldn't do anything about it. He knew better than anyone what kind of person his son was. If he asked little Fatty to say those hypocritical words, little Fatty wouldn't be able to do it. He might even offend people. As for Yi Xian, in his heart, Yi Xian should have extremely high standards and disdain to make friends with others. In fact, he didn't know that every time Yi Xian said that he was a rogue cultivator, people would run away. Yi Xian was helpless. Damn it, I have to ask what your family does before I make friends. Isn't that stupid? A moment later, Lu Xiaoran turned to look into the distance and said, "You guys eat first. A few old acquaintances have arrived. I'll go greet them." Yi Xian and the others didn't respond. Lu Xiaoran shook his head with a smile and left. Yi Ling put a large drumstick in Yi Xian's bowl. "Brother, you should eat more." As she spoke, she put a cabbage in little Fatty's bowl. "Little Fatty, you have to lose weight. Vegetables are delicious, eat more." Little Fatty glanced at the vegetables in his bowl and said bitterly, "Sister Ling, you're too biased." Hearing this, Yi Ling smiled and put a piece of braised pork in Yi Xian's bowl. "Brother, this is delicious." "It's so tender," little Fatty was speechless. When I return, I must ask my mother to give me a younger sister." "No, two." Yi Xian and his sister exchanged glances. In the next moment, the siblings laughed. On the other side, a veiled woman appeared beside Imo Sui-ching. That woman was Han Xiangmeng, who had just arrived. Although Han Xiangmeng was talking to Imo Sui-ching, her gaze would occasionally fall on Yi Xian. She hadn't expected Yi Xian to appear here. Sensing Han Xiangmeng's gaze, Imo Sui-ching glanced at Yi Xian. "Xiangmeng, you know that person?" Han Xiangmeng nodded. Imo Sui-ching smiled. "He's not simple for you to pay so much attention to him. Tell me, which family's young master is he from?" Han Xiangmeng shook her head. "I've only met him once or twice. I'm not very familiar with him." Imo Sui-ching's lips curled into a fox-like smile. "You're not very familiar with him, but you've seen him several times. Why? Have you fallen for him?" As she spoke, she glanced at Yi Xian. "His looks are not bad. His eyesight is passable." Han Xiangmeng shook her head. "Don't spout nonsense. I've only met him twice. I just didn't expect him to appear here." Imo Sui-ching looked around and smiled. "There's nothing strange about him appearing here. There are geniuses from various cities in the country of Jiang here. There are endless benefits to befriending people here. In this society, apart from strength, connections are also important, isn't that so?" Han Xiangmeng said indifferently, "Did you see who he befriended?" Imo Sui-ching was slightly stunned. She glanced at Yi Xian again and said in surprise, "If you put it that way, he's a little special." Han Xiangmeng shook her head. "Let's not talk about him. His matters have nothing to do with us." Imo Sui-ching shook her head. "I'm a little interested. Let's go and take a look." Han Xiangmeng's expression changed slightly. She quickly said, Sui Qing, don't provoke him. He, provoke? Mo Sui Qing smiled. Your words are a little strange. I can see that you're a little afraid of him. What's going on? Just as Han Xiangmeng was about to speak, Mo Sui Qing suddenly said, forget it. He's making me even more curious. Let's go and take a look. After speaking, she pulled Han Xiangmeng to Yi Xian's table. Mo Sui Qing and Han Xiangmeng's actions naturally attracted the attention of countless people. Seeing the two women walk to Yi Xian's table, everyone looked at Yi Xian. Curious. They were naturally curious about Yi Xian's identity. There weren't many people who could catch Mo Sui Qing's attention. Mo Sui Qing sized up Yi Xian and smiled. There's no one here. You don't mind us sitting here, right? Yi Xian glanced at the two women. He naturally knew Han Xiangmeng. However, he didn't understand what they were up to. Before Yi Xian could reply, Mo Sui Qing pulled Han Xiangmeng to sit down. She sized up Yi Xian and asked, young master, how should I address you? Which family are you from? Yi Xian put down his chopsticks and cupped his fists. Yi Xian, a wandering cultivator. A wandering cultivator. Mo Sui Qing's interest grew. Just a wandering cultivator? Yi Xian nodded. Just a wandering cultivator. Mo Sui Qing smiled. A wandering cultivator doesn't have the right to be here. Yi Xian smiled. We're just here to freeload with City Lord Lu. Freeload. Hearing Yi Xian's words, everyone burst into laughter. Mo Sui Qing started laughing as well. It's the first time I've seen someone come here to freeload. Yi Xian pondered deeply for a moment and said, Miss Mo, what do you want? Just get straight to the point. The gazes of everyone had converged here, and it wasn't a good thing for him. He didn't want to make enemies for no reason. Mo Sui Qing smiled. It's nothing much. I'm just here to have some fun. Can't I? Young Master Yi Xian thinks that I'm not worthy to sit at the same table as you? As soon as she finished speaking, the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of the men in the surroundings instantly changed. One of them walked over to Mo Sui Qing's side, and he glanced coldly at Yi Xian. Miss Mo, who does he think he is? Is he even worthy to sit at the same table as you? Slap. Right at this moment, the little fatty suddenly slapped the table, and he pointed furiously at the man who spoke. Who the fuck do you think you are? Are you even worthy to speak to my big brother like that? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you have a death wish? The little fatty was about to speak when Yi Xian pulled him back, and then he looked at Mo Sui Qing. Miss Mo, how did I offend you? Are you going to make enemies for me? Mo Sui Qing blinked her eyes innocently. Make enemies? I didn't. You've wronged me. When she spoke up to this point, she sighed softly. I noticed that young master has an extraordinary bearing, and I intended to get to know you. I never expected that I would be misunderstood by young Master Yi. Alas. Looks like young Master Yi feels that it's beneath him to make friends with me. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. But you've seen it for yourself. Your words and actions have caused me to become the target of public criticism. Mo Sui Qing grinned. That's your problem, isn't it? Yi Xian glanced at Mo Sui Qing. This woman was here to cause trouble. He stood up and pulled the little fatty and Yi Ling along. Let's go. Yi Ling nodded obediently. She picked up an apple from the table and placed it in her pocket. That was because Yi Xian liked to eat fruit after a meal. Seeing that the three of them were about to leave, Mo Sui Qing's expression gradually turned cold. Brother Yi doesn't give me any face at all. Why? Are you really looking down on me? The man beside Mo Sui Qing smiled. Miss Mo, why bother with this kind of person? As he spoke, he glanced at Yi Ling and mocked. It's fine if you're here to freeload, but you actually want to pack when you're leaving. I've never seen or heard of such a thing. Forget it. This kind of lowly person will probably do even more lowly things. Hearing the man's words, Yi Ling's face turned pale. She hurriedly placed the apple back on the table. When Han Xiangmeng heard the man's words, her expression instantly changed. How did the tragedy on the cloud shuttle occur? It was all because of this little girl. Sure enough, as soon as the man finished speaking, Yi Xian vanished on the spot like a gust of wind, and he was in front of the man when he appeared once more. The man didn't even have the time to react before Yi Xian's fist smashed against his mouth. Bang! The man was instantly blasted over 10 m away, and all the teeth in his mouth flew out while blood sprayed from his mouth. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed when they witnessed this scene. Attack! He actually attacked here. Mo Suiqing hadn't expected that the man before her would actually attack, and she gazed coldly at Yi Xian. You're quite capable, aren't you? After he blasted the man flying, Yi Xian walked directly over to Mo Suiqing. A woman like you relies on your beauty to look down on everyone, and you don't know how to respect anyone. You like to play with the men around you, and you're very happy to see them act foolishly because of your words and actions, right? To be honest, I wouldn't have any interest in a woman like you even if you lay naked in front of me. Chapter 31. As soon as Yi Xian finished speaking, the surroundings instantly fell silent. No one had expected that Yi Xian would actually dare to humiliate Mo Suiqing in front of so many people. That was Mo Suiqing, the dream lover of countless men in the imperial capital. Right at this moment, Mo Suiqing suddenly slapped the table. Bang! The table instantly turned into powder. Mo Suiqing's figure flashed and appeared before Yi Xian's group. She stared fixedly at Yi Xian with a smile on the corners of her mouth. Do you have the balls to repeat what you said just now? Yi Xian walked over to Mo Suiqing, and they were very close to each other to the point they could feel each other's breathing. Yi Xian just stared at Mo Suiqing. A woman like you looks down on everyone just because you're slightly beautiful, and you don't know how to respect anyone. You like to play with the men around you, and you're happy to see them act stupidly because of your words and actions, right? To be honest, I wouldn't even be interested in a woman like you even if you lay naked in front of me. Mo Suiqing's smile still remained, but it was slightly cold. Everyone knew that the most beautiful woman in the imperial capital was angry. Mo Suiqing attacked. She spun her palm slightly, and a powerful airflow surged out from her palm like a hurricane. The Qi control realm. Moreover, she'd clearly executed some sort of formidable martial technique. As soon as the airflow appeared, the tables and chairs around her and Yi Xian were instantly turned into powder. However, Yi Xian didn't take a single step back, and he slammed his fist towards the woman who stood before him. Bang! The airflow shattered, and countless hurricanes swept towards the surroundings while both of them retreated by over 10 m. Mo Suiqing glanced coldly at Yi Xian. Not bad. As soon as she finished speaking, she was about to attack again when Han Xiangmeng suddenly stood in front of her. Mo Suiqing spoke in a low voice. Xiangmeng, move aside. Han Xiangmeng spoke in a low voice. Suiqing, let it go. Can you give me some face? Let it go? Mo Suiqing sneered. Xiangmeng, he humiliated me like that, and you want me to just let it go? Han Xiangmeng pulled Mo Suiqing's hand. Listen to my advice, can you? Mo Suiqing frowned slightly. Xiangmeng, just what is his background? Why are you so afraid of him? Just as Han Xiangmeng was about to speak, the crown prince and Lu Xiaoran rushed over. When they saw the scene, Lu Xiaoran's heart sank. The eldest prince glanced at Yi Xian and Mo Suiqing in the distance, and then he walked over to Mo Suiqing and smiled. Miss Mo, what has made you so angry? Mo Suiqing threw a cold look at Yi Xian, who was not far away. Jiang Niansheng, did you invite this guy here? Jiang Niansheng glanced at Yi Xian and said, Miss Mo, has there been a misunderstanding? Misunderstanding? Mo Suiqing chuckled. She sat down at the side and said, Jiang Niansheng, this person you invited insulted me in front of so many people, yet you're telling me that it's a misunderstanding? What? Is he your friend? Friend. Lu Xiaoran's heart shook, and he gazed at the eldest prince. He was very clearly aware that whether or not he could rope in Yi Xian depended on the eldest prince's decision. How could the eldest prince possibly be friends with him? Someone suddenly said, he spoke rudely and publicly insulted Miss Mo. Such a person should be killed immediately to serve as a warning to others. Exactly. Such a vulgar person isn't qualified to sit in the same hall as us. Eldest prince, you should get someone to drive him out immediately so as to prevent him from insulting Miss Mo. The eldest prince pondered deeply for a moment, and then he shook his head. I'm not familiar with him, and I've never invited him. Lu Xiaoran sighed softly in his heart when he heard the eldest prince. Actually, he'd already guessed the outcome. The Mo clan stood behind Mo Suiqing, and Yi Xian had clearly incurred public wrath. So, it was utterly impossible for the eldest prince to stand on Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian's face remained emotionless when he heard the eldest prince, and he just held tightly onto Yi Ling's hand. Right at this moment, someone ridiculed, no wonder he was eating so happily just now. So he snuck in. What the hell are these servants doing? They actually allowed such a person to sneak in. Lu Xiaoran stepped forward and cupped his fists towards the surroundings. I'm the city governor of Thousand Mountain City, Lu Xiaoran. I was the one who brought this young friend here, and I apologize for causing all of you inconvenience. As soon as he finished speaking, he gazed at Yi Xian and laughed bitterly. I never expected that it would be like this. My young friend Yi Xian, I'm sorry. Yi Xian shook his head. It's none of your business. Lu Xiaoran nodded, and then he turned to gaze at the eldest prince, Jiang Niansheng. The latter stared fixedly at him. Elder Lu, do you know what you're doing? Lu Xiaoran smiled. Eldest prince, I'm sorry for the disturbance. As soon as he finished speaking, he gazed at Yi Xian. Young brother, let's go. Obviously, he'd chosen Yi Xian. Everyone felt slight disbelief. Especially the eldest prince. He hadn't expected that Lu Xiaoran would actually choose Yi Xian in front of so many people. At the same time, he was quite shocked. Exactly who is this fellow, Yi Xian? Yi Xian nodded, and then he pulled Yi Ling along with him and was about to leave with Lu Xiaoran. Meanwhile, Mo Suiqing suddenly spoke coldly from nearby. What? You intend to leave just like that? Lu Xiaoran pondered deeply for a moment, and then he walked over to Mo Suiqing. Miss Mo, I presume it was a misunderstanding just now. Please give me some face and let bygones be bygones, all right? Mo Suiqing spoke indifferently. It's fine if you want to let bygones be bygones. Ask him to kneel down and apologize to me, and we'll let bygones be bygones. All right? Lu Xiaoran frowned when he heard this. Meanwhile, Han Xiangmeng suddenly walked over to Yi Xian, and she bowed slightly to Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, even though I didn't do it on purpose, it was caused by me. I'm sorry. Xiangmeng. Mo Suiqing spoke furiously. Whose side are you on? Han Xiangmeng glanced at Mo Suiqing. Suiqing, if you take me as a friend, then let bygones be bygones, all right? Mo Suiqing's expression became quite unsightly. How can we just let bygones be bygones? Right at this moment, a voice resounded abruptly. Everyone watched as a young man walked in from the staircase. He was around the age of 18 or 19, had a robust figure, a crew cut, and a ferocious expression. Tsang Qi. Someone exclaimed, it's that genius from the Tsang clan. I heard he's been accepted into Karaki Academy in advance. Accepted in advance. Many people had to take tests in order to enter Karaki Academy, but some didn't. All of these people had their own uniqueness, and there were only 5 people who didn't have to take tests this year. Tsang Qi was one of them. Moreover, practically everyone in the imperial capital knew that Tsang Qi was Mo Suiqing's follower. Tsang Qi walked over to Mo Suiqing, and then he glanced coldly at Yi Xian. Suiqing, I'll avenge you. Mo Suiqing frowned slightly. Zhang Qi, this has nothing to do with you. Zhang Qi spoke fiercely. He insulted you, and that's the same as insulting me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around to look at Yi Xian. Who the fuck do you think you are to insult Suiqing? I'll fucking shatter your bones bit by bit today. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. This charge was like a ferocious tiger descending a mountain, and an invisible imposing aura had pressed down upon Yi Xian before he even arrived. Yi Xian clenched his right fist tightly, and the imposing aura instantly vanished. In the next moment, everyone watched as Zhang Qi's fist smashed against Yi Xian's chest, and then Yi Xian's fist smashed against Zhang Qi's chest as well. Bang! Bang! Yi Xian moved around 3 back, but Zhang Qi moved over 30 back instead, and he only stopped after colliding with a wall. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. Jiang Nianxing's eyes narrowed slightly while a trace of shock could be seen in his eyes. On the other hand, Mo Suiqing frowned. They were very clearly aware of Zhang Qi's strength. Zhang Qi's physique was unique, and his physical body was extremely formidable. Practically no one in the same realm of cultivation could go against him in terms of physical strength. Yet now, Zhang Qi was actually in a disadvantageous position. Zhang Qi's eyes were filled with disbelief. How could you possibly? Yi Xian's face was emotionless. A competition of physical strength? He'd truly never feared anyone. After all, he'd cultivated to the golden body realm. Not to mention humans, he even dared to fight demon beasts with his physical body when it came to physical strength. I refuse to believe it. Zhang Qi suddenly roared furiously as he charged at Yi Xian again. However, Yi Xian's figure shook and arrived in front of Zhang Qi first, and then their fists collided once more. Bang! Crack! The sound of bones breaking resounded. Zhang Qi's entire right arm broke, and then his figure was blasted flying against the wall. Bang! The entire wall shook violently while Zhang Qi struggled for a moment, but he wasn't able to stand up in the end. Yi Xian glanced coldly at the surroundings, and then he took Yi Ling's hand. Let's go. Wait. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly resounded. It was the eldest prince, Jiang Nianxing. The eldest prince walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. Brother Yi, I understand what happened. You really did insult Miss Mo, so please apologize to Miss Mo. The eldest prince is benevolent. Some people bowed slightly to Jiang Nianxing. Please uphold justice, eldest prince. This person abused his power to bully others and insulted Miss Mo. His crimes are unforgivable. Please give the order to lock him up. Jiang Nianxing cupped his fists towards the surroundings. Don't worry everyone, justice is everywhere. I definitely won't turn a blind eye to it, and I'll definitely seek justice for Miss Mo. As soon as he finished speaking, he gazed at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, I'm afraid I won't be able to allow you to leave the Immortal Indulgence Pavilion if you don't apologize today. Yi Xian smiled. Your Highness, the eldest prince, you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone by winning over the people's hearts now. Jiang Nianxing spoke indifferently. Apologize. Please kneel down and apologize to show your sincerity. As soon as he finished speaking, a group of spear-wielding guards appeared in the surroundings. Each one of them was an elite soldier picked out of 10,000. Kneel down and apologize. Yi Xian chuckled and looked at Lu Shaoran beside him. Senior Lu, and Miss Han, please help me look after my sister. The reason why he asked Han Xiangmeng was because one more person would give Yi Ling an extra layer of protection. Hearing Yi Xian's words, Lu Shaoran hesitated for a moment before nodding. Han Xiangmeng sighed softly and didn't say anything. Yi Xian turned to look at Jiang Nianxing and the others. Jiang Nianxing narrowed his eyes. Guards, this person trespassed into the Immortal Indulgence Pavilion, publicly insulted Miss Mo, and even injured someone. His crime is unforgivable. Kill him immediately. The guards directly charged at Yi Xian. At this moment, footsteps suddenly rang out from the staircase. In the next moment, everyone was stunned. At the staircase, a woman stood there. Her clothes were whiter than snow, like a goddess from the heavens. And Lanxiu. The guards knelt down on one knee when they saw Lanxiu, and the others hurriedly bowed deeply and spoke in unison, "Greetings, and Guesher." Even the eldest prince, Jiang Niansheng, hurriedly bowed. On the other hand, Mo Suiqing, who had a livid expression, stood up and bowed slightly as well. The Mo clan's Mo Suiqing greets and Guesher. And Lanxiu nodded slightly. Under the gazes of everyone, she walked over to Yi Xian, and there was a trace of surprise in her eyes after she sized Yi Xian up. "Fight." As she spoke, she grinned. "You surprised me quite a bit. I haven't seen you for a short period of time, yet you've actually attained such a level. Brother Yi, can we have a chat?" "Brother Yi." Everyone here was instantly dumbstruck when they heard the words Brother Yi. Chapter 32. Brother Yi. At this moment, everyone here was truly shocked. How many people in the imperial capital could be called brother by Lanxiu? Perhaps there were, but they were absolutely rare existences. How could someone at Lanxiu's level be willing to be friends with someone of the same generation, be an ordinary person? Everyone gazed at Yi Xian, and their eyes were filled with curiosity at this moment. Even Mo Suiqing had a trace of surprise in her eyes. She knew a little about Lanxiu, and she knew that there were probably less than a handful of people in the imperial capital that Lanxiu thought highly of. What ability does this young man possess? On the other hand, the eldest prince, Jiang Niansheng, had an extremely unsightly expression on his face. At this moment, he knew that he might have made the wrong bet. In front of Lanxiu, Yi Xian smiled. "Great." Right at this moment, a young man suddenly walked over to Lanxiu, and he bowed deeply to her. "Guesheran, this person insulted Miss Mo and publicly assaulted her. He should be severely punished. Abaddon, please uphold justice." And Lanxiu glanced at the man who spoke and said, "Who are you?" The man was delighted when he heard this, and he cupped his fists and said, "I'm Li Feng from the Li clan." "Greetings, Guesheran." And Lanxiu gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian remained silent. Yi Ling grew anxious and hurriedly explained, "Big sisterin, it was they who bullied her." As she spoke, she quickly described what had happened earlier. A short moment later, Lanxiu turned to gaze at Mo Suiqing, and the latter's expression changed slightly. The Mo clan was formidable indeed, but not to mention the Mo clan, even formidable powers like Kuraki Academy and Immortal Indulgence in didn't dare to rashly offend this person. And Lanxiu withdrew her gaze and said, "Miss Mo, the Mo clan is a great clan. As the representative of the younger generation of the Mo clan, every single word and action of yours represents the Mo clan. It's best if you don't act so childishly in the future. What do you think?" Mo Suiqing's expression was rather unsightly, and she didn't answer. And Lanxiu looked straight at Mo Suiqing. "If you don't answer, then that means you have resentment in your heart. You can't accept it." As soon as she finished speaking, a strand of formidable concept suddenly swept out from within Lanxiu. In the blink of an eye, Mo Suiqing instantly seemed as if she'd been pressed down by a mountain, and her figure directly bent down. Moreover, her legs were even pressed down to the point of gradually bending. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings instantly changed when they witnessed this scene. He was angry. At that moment, no one dared to speak up for Mo Suiqing. Under everyone's gaze, Mo Suiqing finally knelt on the ground. However, she clenched her fists tightly and her expression was ferocious. She was also a proud son of heaven. When had she ever been treated like this? Right at this moment, an old man suddenly appeared at the side, and the old man hurriedly bowed deeply to Lanxiu. "Country scholarin, my young miss is young and insensible. If she's offended you, I hope country scholarin can spare her this time out of consideration for the head of the family. Thank you very much." And Lanxiu withdrew her concept, and then Mo Suiqing instantly slumped to the ground. And Lanxiu glanced at Mo Suiqing and said indifferently, go back and tell the Mo clan's patriarch that Brother Yi is a friend of mine. If the Mo clan is displeased by my actions today, then feel free to come look for me. If I find out that the Mo clan has hatred towards Brother Yi and his younger sister because of me, then I, and Lanxiu, will definitely head to the Mo clan and seek justice for them. The old man hurriedly nodded, and then he left with Mo Suiqing. And Lanxiu turned around to gaze at the eldest prince, and the latter's expression changed slightly. And Lanxiu said indifferently, "Eldest prince, do you know that it's not easy for the kingdom of Jiang to produce a genius? You've suppressed a genius of my kingdom for your own selfish reasons. Such actions are truly short-sighted and stupid to the extreme." Jiang Mianqing's expression was rather unsightly, but he didn't dare answer. Even his imperial father had to treat this person before him with respect. Others might not know what Lanxiu meant to the kingdom of Jiang, but as a member of the imperial family, he knew it the best. It could be said that the Jiang kingdom's imperial family and countless clans would rather sacrifice him than offend Lanxiu in the slightest. Because only Lanxiu was capable of suppressing the monstrous geniuses of the surrounding kingdoms, and it was because of her that the surrounding kingdoms were fearful of the kingdom of Jiang and didn't dare offend Lanxiu rashly. Lanxiu slowly closed her eyes. "I'll resign from the position of entertaining the new students, and I'm not allowed to hold this position for the next 5 years. The eldest prince bowed deeply, and then he turned around and left. However, he glanced at Yi Xian before he left. And Lanxiu gazed at Yi Xian and said, "Brother Yi, please." Yi Xian took Yi Ling's hand and said, "Can I bring my younger sister along?" And Lanxiu smiled and said, "Of course." Just like that, and Lanxiu and Yi Xian turned around and left under the gazes of everyone in the hall. On the other hand, everyone in the hall remained silent for a long time. It was already night time, and the three of them were walking side by side on the quiet street. And Lanxiu said softly, "I never expected that after we parted that day, Brother Ye's sword heart would already be so clear, and he even comprehended battle intent. The current Brother Yi can be said to be a quasi-martial Dao grandmaster." Brother Yi said in a deep voice, "Why are you able to see through everything about me with a glance?" He had wanted to ask this question since they were in Qing City. And Lanxiu chuckled and said, "My eyes are quite special, and I can see the essence." Seeing that Lanxiu didn't say anything, Yi Xian didn't ask any further. And Lanxiu stopped in her tracks. She was standing right in front of Yi Xian. Two World City, the one who charged towards the Tang Empire's black armored cavalry and dared to block several thousand black armored cavalry alone, was it you? Yi Xian was a little surprised and said, "You, how do you know?" And Lanxiu smiled and said, "The 9th princess is my close friend. She told me about what happened that day. The azure-clothed youth even brought a younger sister with him. I'm sure that it was you." Beside Yi Xian, Yi Ling smiled sweetly and hugged Yi Xian's arm tightly. And Lanxiu walked forward slowly and said, "Brother Yi, the hearts of the people in the imperial capital are complicated, and everyone only cares about their own interests. But how many people care about national affairs? If any of the people in this hall were in Two World City that day, I'm afraid none of them would stand out like Brother Yi did." Yi Xian said softly, "Missin cares about the state of Jiang?" And Lanxiu smiled and said, "Only with a country can there be a home, and only with a home can there be a person. What I care about isn't the state of Jiang's imperial family, but this country. Do you understand?" Yi Xian nodded when he heard this. "I understand." In fact, he and Lanxiu had the same thoughts on this point. He, Yi Xian, was a selfish person, but if the country was in trouble, he would also stand out. Just like Lanxiu, he wasn't loyal to the state of Jiang's imperial family, and what he cared about was the state of Jiang. And Lanxiu walked forward slowly while Yi Xian and his younger sister followed behind her slowly. Under the moonlight, Lanxiu's clothes were white like snow, and she truly seemed like a goddess that had descended to the mortal world. What a beautiful woman. Meanwhile, Lanxiu said, "Brother Yi, the hearts of the people in the imperial capital are complicated. You're a swordsman, and you have a rather straightforward personality. So it's best to be careful in the imperial capital. Yi Xian glanced at Enlancio and said, "Thank you." As he spoke, he paused for a moment and said, "Can we fight?" Fight. What he yearned for the most right now was to fight someone, to fight an expert. Because the shadow within the pagoda wasn't a match for him at all. Presently, he had a vague understanding of his own strength. Exactly what level has my strength reached? When she heard Yi Xian, Enlancio turned around to look at Yi Xian, and then she smiled. This smile caused the heavens and the earth to dim in comparison. Even Yi Xian was slightly dazed by this, but he quickly recovered from his shock. By Yi Xian's side, Yi Ling said in a light voice, "Big sister, you're really beautiful." Enlancio lightly rubbed Yi Ling's little head. Beauty is only a layer of skin. A person's strength and beauty lies in the heart. As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "How about we fight after you attain the Qi resistance realm?" The Qi resistance realm. Yi Xian thought for a moment, and then he nodded. "All right." Enlancio stopped moving. "Brother Yi, let's bid our farewells here." Yi Xian cupped his fists towards Enlancio. "Listen, until we meet again." As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled Yi Ling along as he turned around and left. On the other hand, Yi Ling playfully waved at Enlancio. Obviously, she really liked Enlancio. As she watched Yi Xian and Yi Ling vanish at the end of the street, Enlancio withdrew her gaze and continued forward. Moreover, an old man had suddenly appeared by her side. The old man spoke in a low voice. "Young miss, the closer you get to him, the greater the trouble he might face." Enlancio said in a light voice, "Elder Ling, go tell them that I'll definitely not forgive anyone who dares to look for trouble with them because of me." Elder Ling laughed bitterly. "Young miss, wouldn't it be fine if you don't get close to him?" Enlancio said in a light voice, "You feel that he isn't worthy of becoming friends with me?" Elder Ling shook his head. He comprehended battle intent at such a young age and possesses a clear sword heart. Such natural talent and fortune are already extremely rare. If young miss is just ordinary friends with him, then he barely has the qualifications. But if, when he spoke up to here, he didn't continue. Because he noticed that his young miss was slightly special towards that young man. This wasn't a good thing. Enlancio chuckled lightly. "Elder Ling, you're afraid that I'll fall for him, right?" Elder Ling laughed bitterly. "My young miss is a bit too straightforward. Can't she be a bit more tactful and reserved?" Enlancio turned around and glanced at the place Yi Xian and Yi Ling had vanished. "When I met him in Azure City, I rather admired his feelings towards my younger sister, and I didn't just admire him for what happened in Two World City." As she spoke, she withdrew her gaze and smiled lightly. A good man should be like this. Elder Ling's face instantly sank when he heard this. On the other hand, Enlancio had already gone far away. Elder Ling sighed lightly on the spot. "Little fellow, you better not have any stray thoughts. Otherwise, your life will be extremely bitter and even miserable." No one was clearer than him about how terrifying his young miss was. If he wanted to be together with his young miss, then identity, strength, natural talent, and background were all indispensable. As for Yi Xian, he'd already investigated clearly. He really was just an abandoned pawn of a tiny world. Just this aspect of identity alone was already worlds apart between the two of them. A moment later, Elder Ling sighed softly and followed after them. At the end of the street, Yi Xian carried Yi Ling on his back and slowly walked into the distance. "Big brother, big sister and is so beautiful, Big brother, do you like big sister? Big brother, why don't you take big sister as your wife? I think big sister is a good match for you. Your big brother doesn't have anything. Do you want her to starve with me? Then do you like her? Big brother only wants you to be safe forever. Big brother. I want to be with you forever. Idiot, you still want to get married. I'm not marrying. Why? Because I'll never meet anyone who treats me better than big brother. Chapter 33. Yi Xian carried his sister back to the mansion. As soon as they arrived, Yi Ling fell asleep. After placing Yi Ling on the bed, Yi Ling had curled up into a ball and was trembling uncontrollably. Yi Xian was shocked. He quickly licked Yi Ling's blanket, but Yi Ling was still cold. Seeing this, Yi Xian panicked. As if thinking of something, he quickly took out the Heaven Fire Warm Jade hanging on Yi Ling's neck. When he saw the Heaven Fire Warm Jade, he was stunned. There was a faint layer of frost on the surface of the Heaven Fire Warm Jade. Senior? Yi Xian shouted in his heart, Senior, bring the jade in. The mysterious woman's voice suddenly rang out. Yi Xian quickly brought the Heaven Fire Warm Jade into the prison pagoda. After a while, the Heaven Fire Warm Jade appeared in Yi Xian's hand again. At this time, the Heaven Fire Warm Jade had returned to its original appearance. Yi Xian quickly hung the Heaven Fire Warm Jade on Yi Ling's neck. Gradually, Yi Ling's complexion improved. Seeing this, Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, the mysterious woman's voice suddenly rang out. 99% of the jade's spiritual power and source have disappeared. It will last for about a day at most. After that, it will become a useless stone. You should plan ahead. Useless stone. Yi Xian's expression gradually turned serious. If the Heaven Fire Warm Jade lost its effect, how could his sister withstand the cold qi? After a while, Yi Xian left the room. Outside the door, looking at the bright moon in the night sky, Yi Xian clenched his fists tightly. Tomorrow was the day of recruitment for Kuraki College. Kuraki College. This was the largest college in Jiang country. Once he joined Kuraki College, he could seek medical treatment for his sister. And his sister would not have to suffer from the pain of her illness. At this moment, Lu Xiaoran arrived at the courtyard. Lu Xiaoran smiled bitterly. Little friend Yi, I'm sorry about tonight. Yi Xian shook his head. This has nothing to do with Senior Lu. Lu Xiaoran said softly, I was more optimistic about the first prince, but today's matter made me realize that he isn't what I thought he was. Sigh, these descendants of the imperial family really know how to put on a show. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, Senior Lu, forgive me for being frank, but isn't it too early for you to choose a side now? Moreover, I'm afraid that person above us isn't willing to see you choose a side now. Lu Xiaoran smiled bitterly. Of course I know. However, if I don't choose a side now, I'm afraid it will be too late in the future. Yi Xian shook his head. With all due respect, Senior Lu only needs to pledge loyalty to His Majesty. As long as His Majesty doesn't die, nothing will happen to Senior Lu and the Lu family. Lu Xiaoran nodded. I'm thinking the same thing. Our Lu family doesn't want to be involved in the battle for the crown prince position. Yi Xian nodded and didn't say anything else. Meanwhile, Lu Xiaoran smiled and said, Young brother, Kuraki Academy is recruiting students tomorrow. At that time, I'll have to rely on you to take good care of my disappointing son. Yi Xian smiled and said, Senior Lu, I might not even be able to join Kuraki Academy. Lu Xiaoran shook his head lightly. If Kuraki Academy doesn't accept you, then it'll be their greatest loss. Yi Xian smiled and remained silent. After Lu Xiaoran left, Yi Xian returned to the pagoda. He just returned to the pagoda when he heard something ringing from above. It was very soft, but he definitely heard it. Yi Xian spoke in a low voice. Senior, what was that? She said, what do you think it should be? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Senior, exactly what sort of existence is in the second level? After a short moment of silence, she said, it's not a good person. In short, you have to find a way to obtain a spirit sword to improve your cultivation once you enter the academy. Everything has to be sped up. Yi Xian nodded. The current pagoda made it difficult for him to feel at ease. Or it should be said that he was perturbed at all times. because he himself felt that the existence in the second level was not a good person. There was no proof, it was just a feeling, and this feeling was given to him by the pagoda. It should be said that it was a warning from the pagoda. Just as the mysterious woman said, he had to speed up. Of course, his top priority now was to join Karaki Academy. A day passed. Early in the morning, a red sun slowly rose from the horizon. Yi Xian pulled his sister Yi Ling out of the mansion's entrance. Outside the entrance was Lu Xiaoran and little fatty Lu Ming. Lu Xiaoran sized up Yi Xian. Yi Xian had changed into a cloud-white robe today. His looks were extremely good to begin with, and with a bit of dressing up, he could indeed be called a handsome man. If he wore a sword at his waist and revealed his identity as a swordsman, he would probably be able to charm many young girls in the imperial city. As for Yi Ling, she had also changed into a dark green skirt, and there was a long braid behind her head. Although she was young, anyone could see that she was a beauty in the making. In a few years, she would definitely be a beauty that could cause the downfall of a city. After seeing the appearance of the brother and sister, Lu Xiaoran was even more certain that this pair of brother and sister's origins were definitely not simple. Retracting his thoughts, Lu Xiaoran smiled and said, "Little friend Yi, let's go." Yi Xian nodded, then pulled Yi Ling and followed Lu Xiaoran and his father into the distance. They were not far from Karaki Academy, so the few of them chose to walk. Today, the imperial city could be said to be unusually lively. Karaki Academy's recruitment could be said to be the most important event in the imperial city. In the entire Jiang country, the best way to stand out was to enter Karaki Academy. Entering Karaki Academy could be said to be like a carp leaping through the dragon's gate. Therefore, every time Karaki Academy recruited students, geniuses from all over the Jiang country would rush over. When these geniuses came, their families would naturally accompany them. Therefore, the imperial city was bustling. In fact, what Yi Xian did not know about Dao Yi was that without Lu Xiaoran, he and his sister would not even be able to find a place to stay in the imperial city. This was because the inns in the imperial city had basically been booked a month ago. Today, Yi Ling was unusually happy because Yi Xian would be joining Karaki Academy today. Once Yi Xian joined Karaki Academy, Yi Xian would no longer be alone. He would have someone to rely on, and he would also have a good future. At that time, even if her illness could not be cured, she could be at ease. Thinking up to this point, Yi Ling tilted her head and glanced at Yi Xian. She held Yi Xian's hand tightly. If it was possible, she also wanted to live because her brother had been living too tirelessly ever since their mother left them. She was not afraid of death, but she was afraid that her brother would be lonely after she died. More and more people gathered on the streets, and all of them were heading in the same direction. Karaki Academy. In the north of the imperial city, there was a huge mountain called Sung Mountain. It was nearly 3,000 meters tall, and one could overlook the entire imperial city from the waist of the mountain. And on this Tsang mountain was Karaki Academy. On the way, Lu Xiaoran said with a smile, "Karaki Academy has a long history. In this part of the world, the dynasties have changed countless times, but Karaki Academy has always existed. Like the drunken Immortal restaurant, they are two true giants." Yi Xian said in a deep voice, "Are there also Karaki academies in other countries?" Lu Xiaoran nodded, "Of course there are. It is said that the headquarters of Karaki Academy is located in the central continent, but that is a very far place." Saying that, he shook his head with a smile, and then looked at Yi Xian, "Little friend Yi, if you have the opportunity in the future, you should leave the country of Jiang, leave the Qing province, and see the wider world outside. Only then will you not have come to this world in vain." Yi Xian said with a smile, "It's too far away. The most important thing is to take care of the present." Lu Xiaoran laughed, "Of course." Soon, the group arrived at the foot of Tsang Mountain. Standing at the foot of Tsang Mountain and looking up, a feeling of insignificance involuntarily arose in their hearts. At this time, there was a sea of people at the foot of Tsang Mountain. Obviously, these people had come to participate in the recruitment of Karaki Academy. And Yi Xian was also a little surprised, because these people before him were at least in the qi-controlling realm, and they were all very young. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, Lu Xiaoran said with a smile, "Don't be surprised, all the geniuses of the country of Jiang are here. Think about it, out of a population of tens of millions, only these geniuses are here. Are there many?" Yi Xian nodded. In Qincheng, an 18-year-old in the qi-controlling realm was definitely a super genius. However, Qincheng was only a small city. If placed in some big cities, they might only be considered ordinary geniuses. And if placed in the whole country of Jiang, they might only be considered ordinary. At this time, an immortal crane flew down from the sky, and on the back of the crane sat an old man. Soon, the immortal crane arrived above the crowd, and the old man looked down. This old man is the outer dean of Kuraki Academy, Li, and he is in charge of today's recruitment. Today's recruitment is limited to 20 people, and there will be a total of 3 rounds. If there are more than 20 people who pass the 3 rounds, then these 20 people will compete with each other, and the winner will stay. 20. The crowd was in an uproar when they heard this voice. There were at least 1,000 people here, and only 20 meant that 99% of them would be eliminated. Yi Xian's expression turned serious as well. Only 20 meant that the competition would be extremely brutal. The old man's voice resounded once more in the sky. The first round is to ascend the mountain. Those who are unable to ascend the mountain on foot will be eliminated immediately. Ascend the mountain? Yi Xian was stunned, and then he looked at Lu Xiaoran. It's that simple? Lu Xiaoran shook his head. That's not simple. This ascent is suppressed by a formation, and the objective of this round is to eliminate those with unstable realms. Even though most people have attained the qi-controlling realm, many of them are not at that realm. Yi Xian nodded, and then he looked at Lu Ming. Senior, little Ming doesn't seem to have attained the qi-controlling realm. Lu Xiaoran smiled bitterly. Of course he hasn't, and he's only entering Kuraki Academy as a special student. Special student? Yi Xian was puzzled. What do you mean? Lu Xiaoran looked embarrassed. Actually, it's just a degree bought with money, but it's not an official student. It's just a low-level class. There will be teachers in this class, but they're much worse than official students. Moreover, they don't have the status of an official student. Beside him, Lu Ming was a little dissatisfied. Big brother, Dad, at least leave me some face. Hearing this, Lu Xiaoran was infuriated and said angrily, "Face my ass. If you had worked hard, would your father have begged someone to get you a degree?" Lu Ming curled his lips, not daring to talk back. Yi Xian and his sister looked at each other and smiled. At this moment, Lu Xiaoran suddenly said, "Little friend Yi, let's go to the starting point." Yi Xian nodded. Just like that, the group arrived at a Shao Dao at the foot of Tsang Mountain. Beside the Shao Dao, there was a wooden stake, and on the wooden stake, there was a man who had been dead for God knows how long. At the scene, everyone pointed at the man and discussed animatedly. Yi Xian glanced at the man, then turned to look at Lu Xiaoran. "Senior, this is?" Lu Xiaoran said in a deep voice, "A student of Blue Waves Academy." Blue Waves Academy. Yi Xian was stunned, then said, "Is he also from our imperial capital?" Lu Xiaoran nodded. "It's normal that you haven't heard of it. Now, in the country of Jiang, everyone knows of Kuraki Academy, but very few people know of Blue Waves Academy. In fact, in the previous dynasty, Blue Waves Academy and Kuraki Academy were equally famous, but for some unknown reason, these two academies became mortal enemies. Every 3 years, there would be a life and death competition between them. Later, for some unknown reason, the strength of Blue Waves Academy gradually weakened, while Kuraki Academy became stronger and stronger, so, for the last 50 years, Blue Waves Academy and Kuraki Academy were almost completely defeated in the life and death competition, and those students who represented Blue Waves Academy to participate in the life and death competition were nailed to this Shao Dao. If you go up from here, you will encounter many corpses. After speaking, he shook his head and sighed. According to the agreement between both sides, if Blue Waves Academy can win once, they can take away the corpses of these students. Unfortunately, until now, no one from Blue Waves Academy has been able to defeat the students of Kuraki Academy. Chapter 34. Blue Waves Academy. Yi Xian looked at the corpse of the man in front of him, and his heart was filled with emotions. In Qingsheng, the aristocratic families used extremely cruel methods to fight for their own interests. But he did not expect that in the imperial capital, the fights between the major forces were even more cruel, and they did not show any mercy. At this time, Lu Xiaoran suddenly pointed at a round platform not far away from Xiao Dao. Little friend, do you know what this is? Yi Xian turned his head and looked at the round platform not far away. The round platform was more than 40 zhang wide, and on the round platform, there were 9 wooden people holding wooden swords. The 9 wooden people stood side by side in a neat row. This is? Yi Xian was somewhat curious and asked. Lu Xiaoran said in Xiao Dao, this is the famous 9-palace formation of Kuraki Academy. It is said that this formation was created by the founder of Kuraki Academy. In this 100 countries of Qingzhou, all Kuraki Academy has this formation. And the purpose of this formation is said to be a test, a special test. As long as one can break this formation before the age of 20, the dean of Kuraki Academy must accept this person as his direct disciple, which is equivalent to the disciple of the dean. After saying that, he shook his head and smiled. Unfortunately, this formation has not been broken for nearly 50 years already. 9-palace formation. Yi Xian sized up the 9 wooden people. Is this formation very powerful? Lu Xiaoran smiled bitterly. It is not just powerful. Once, there was a higher sky realm powerhouse who wanted to try it, but unfortunately, that person was directly killed in less than 10 breaths. And those who can reach higher sky realm before the age of 20, that is very few. Speaking until here, he slightly paused, then said again, it is said that Kuraki Academy invited An Guesher to break this formation, but, whether she actually came or not, no one knows. Just when Yi Xian was about to say something, at this time, an old voice suddenly resounded from the sky, the test begins. Along with this voice, the people gathered in front of Xiao Dao all rushed out. Yi Xian turned his head and stroked Yi Ling's small head, then he looked at Lu Xiaoran. Senior Lu, please look after my sister. Lu Xiaoran smiled. Of course. Yi Ling gave Yi Xian a gentle hug. Brother, you can do it. Yi Xian chuckled, then turned around and joined the crowd. Looking at Yi Xian disappearing into the crowd, Yi Ling smiled. But very quickly, her body trembled. She felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. Cold air overflowed from her body, making her look like a block of ice. Lu Xiaoran was shocked when he saw this scene, and he hurriedly said, Come, let's go back first. Yi Ling shook his head. Uncle Lu, it's fine. As she spoke, she took out the heaven fire warm jade. With this, I'll be fine. Lu Xiaoran still wanted to say something, but Yi Ling raised her head and looked into the distance. She said softly, only when I see Big Brother joining Kuraki Academy can I feel at ease. Lu Xiaoran sighed softly. He patted Lu Ming lightly and said, Go get Sister Ling 2 long furs. Be quick. Little fatty Lu Ming hurriedly nodded, then turned around and ran. In the distance, Yi Xian had already disappeared into the crowd. Like everyone else, Yi Xian was quite excited. Because Kuraki Academy was right in front of him. Once he joined Kuraki Academy, there would be hope for his sister's illness. In the crowd, Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the waist of the mountain. He took a deep breath and said, Let's do it. For my sister and for myself. After saying that, he quickened his pace. In the beginning, the crowd was very fast. But after walking for around 5 kilometers, almost 90% of them slowed down. Moreover, they were getting slower and slower. This was because as they walked, an invisible pressure suddenly appeared on their bodies. With every step they took, this pressure would increase by a bit. Therefore, after the people at the front had walked for around 10 kilometers, some people behind them were gradually being eliminated. However, the speed of the people at the front was still very fast. Obviously, there were people who were very weak, but there were also people who were very strong. Yi Xian walked at a moderate pace. As for the invisible pressure, it didn't affect him at all. Because his bones and flesh were now so strong that even a levitation realm cultivator might not be able to compete with him. Hidden realm. At this time, the advantage and strength of his hidden realm could be seen. Time passed by slowly. The higher they walked, the fewer people there were. After 2 hours, there were less than 100 people who were still walking. And most of them were walking with great difficulty. However, there were still a few who stood out. One of them was a man in embroidered robes. This person had taken the lead from the beginning and had left the people behind him a distance of nearly 10 meters. At the beginning, everyone thought that he would slow down. However, what they didn't expect was that even until now, this person's speed was still extremely fast. Not far behind the man in embroidered robes was a man in a luxurious robe and a man with a long knife at his waist. The two men were nearly 10 meters away from the man in embroidered robes. Both of them stared at the man in embroidered robes in the distance. Although their speed was slightly slower than before, it was still steady and they didn't feel tired. And behind these two men, there were less than 100 people left. Most of them were exhausted and walking with great difficulty. As for Yi Xian, he was still walking at a moderate pace. The pressure really didn't affect him at all. Even after walking for a while, the pressure on his body didn't grow stronger. Instead, he didn't feel any pressure at all. As for why he didn't walk quickly, he actually didn't think about this question. He was simply walking. To him, it didn't matter if he walked fast or slow, as long as he walked to the end. In other words, he didn't purposely walk. He could walk however he wanted. Half an hour later, there were less than 40 people still walking on Xiaodao. However, at this moment, the man in embroidered robes who was the leader had already walked to the end, followed by the man in luxurious robe and the man with a long knife. And when he was about to reach the end, he suddenly stopped and turned his head to look at a wooden stake beside Xiaodao. A man was nailed to the wooden stake. From his appearance, he seemed to be approximately 20 years old. This man was quite miserable. He didn't have both hands and feet. He didn't even have eyeballs. There were only 2 empty black holes in his eyes. Needless to say, he should also be a student of Blue Waves Academy. Moreover, from the corpse, he might have died not long ago. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. Needless to say, Blue Waves Academy and Karaki Academy should have a blood feud. Without stopping, Yi Xian quickly walked to the end. After all 42 people reached the end, a red-crowned crane flew above everyone's head. On the red-crowned crane, Cang Zhong looked down at everyone. Finally, his gaze fell on Yi Xian. When he saw Yi Xian, his gaze became quite ice-cold. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian frowned because he could already feel the hostility of the other party. Merely, he didn't understand. He didn't have any grudges with the other party. In fact, they hadn't even met before, so why did the other party have a grudge against him? You come out. On the back of the red-crowned crane, Cang Zhong looked down at Yi Xian. His voice was ice-cold and didn't contain a trace of emotion. Yi Xian glanced at Cang Zhong and walked out of the crowd. Cang Zhong looked down at Yi Xian and said, "My Karaki Academy's minimum requirement is to reach Qi-controlling realm before the age of 18. And you haven't reached Qi-controlling realm, right? Haven't reached Qi-controlling realm." As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. Very quickly, everyone looked at Yi Xian. After all, Karaki Academy's minimum requirement was to reach Qi-controlling realm before the age of 18. But Yi Xian hadn't reached Qi-controlling realm. To be more serious, he was lying. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Elder Tsang, even though I haven't reached Qi-controlling realm, I have passed the first test. So what? On the back of the red-crowned crane, Tsang Zhong said coldly, my Kuraki Academy's rule states that those who haven't reached Qi-controlling realm before the age of 18 cannot participate in the test. Even if you pass the first test, it's meaningless. Therefore, I declare that you don't have the right to participate in the test. According to the rules, you should be punished with 100 beatings and immediately kicked off Tsang Mountain. As soon as Tsang Zhong's voice fell, 2 levitation realm experts arrived before Yi Xian. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly looked straight at Tsang Zhong. Elder Tsang, you and I have never met before. But this is the first time we have met, yet you are targeting me. I have offended you before. He wasn't stupid, he naturally knew that the elder in front of him was targeting him. Tsang Zhong's lips curled into a mocking smile. Targeting you? If you knew it would be like this, why did you do it in the first place? Tsang Zhong. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes slightly. He suddenly recalled something. At the banquet last night, he had beaten up a man, and that man was called Tsang Qi. At this moment, after taking a closer look, he discovered that this elder Tsang Zhong had a stamped badge on his chest. Tsang Qi also had the same badge on his chest that day. This kind of badge was usually a family badge, and it was also a symbol of status. Without a doubt, this person in front of him was Tsang Qi's elder. Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, a man suddenly stood up. Yi Xian, you really are stupid. Yi Xian turned his head to look at the man. He looked quite familiar. It didn't take long for Chen Shi to remember. It was the man who'd stood up for Mo Suiqing at the banquet that day, and he was called Li Feng. Li Feng laughed coldly. Do you think you can look down on everyone just because you have the protection of Engwisher? Today, I'll allow you to witness the strength of all of us. As he spoke, he bowed slightly to Tsang Zhong who stood in midair. Elder Tsang, this person hasn't attained the Qi-controlling realm, yet he intends to participate in the exam this time. His actions are clearly disrespecting Kuraki Academy, and for the sake of the Academy's dignity, I hope Elder Tsang can punish him severely. As soon as Li Feng finished speaking, another 8 men by Yi Xian's side stood forward, and then they bowed deeply and spoke in unison, Elder Tsang Zhong, please punish him severely. Tsang Zhong laughed coldly. Right, the old man actually forgot about this. Drag him away and beat him to death as a warning to others. Those 2 Void Realm experts were about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly withdrew a jade pendant, and he looked Tsang Zhong in the eyes and said, this is Engwisher's jade pendant. I was recommended to Kuraki Academy by her. Everyone present was shocked and they heard this. Engwisher's recommendation. That's a huge amount. Even the man in embroidered clothes who'd taken the lead couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian with slight curiosity in his eyes. Engwisher was the idol of everyone in the state of Zhang's younger generation. In midair, Tsang Zhong's expression was extremely unsightly. He hadn't expected that Yi Xian would actually possess an Lunxios jade pendant. I have to give face to Engwisher. Li Feng became anxious when he saw Tsang Zhong remain silent, and he didn't even think before pointing at Yi Xian angrily. How dare you? You're just a piece of trash at the Qi transformation realm. How could you possibly be recommended by Engwisher? This jade pendant is definitely fake. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly vanished on the spot, and when he reappeared, he was already in front of Li Feng. Under everyone's gazes, Yi Xian directly slapped Li Feng's face. Motherf ***, slap. Li Feng was sent flying by this slap. Everyone was stunned. P.S. Thank you for the donations and monthly votes from my friends yesterday. I saw it and remembered it all. I'm truly grateful. Chapter 35. Hit someone. Hit someone here. Everyone was stunned. Li Feng, who was hit by Yi Xian, was stunned as well. Because he really hadn't expected that Yi Xian would attack him. After all, this was Kuraki Academy, and Tsang Zhong was here. Even Tsang Zhong was slightly stunned because he hadn't expected that someone would dare to hit someone in front of him. Moreover, it was done in such a brazen manner. Meanwhile, Li Feng crawled up from the ground, and he pointed angrily at Yi Xian and said fiercely, "You're actually so arrogant. You." Before he could finish speaking, Yi Xian, who was not far away from him, suddenly approached him. Then, before he could come to his senses, Yi Xian slapped him in the face again. Slap. Along with a resounding slap, Li Feng's entire body was directly slapped away. Some of the students couldn't help but glance at Yi Xian with shock when they witnessed this scene. Li Feng was at the chi-controlling realm, but he actually couldn't fight back at all. If the first time Li Feng was hit was because of Yi Xian's sneak attack, then the second time wasn't a sneak attack, but a fair slap. Even then, Li Feng still couldn't fight back at all. His strength was suppressed. Presumptuous. At this moment, Zhang Zhong, who was sitting on the back of the red-crowned crane, suddenly shouted angrily. In an instant, an invisible pressure enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian raised his head and looked Zhang Zhong in the eyes. "Elder Zhang, it's not good to use public interests for personal gain, right?" Zhang Zhong sneered, "Using public interests for personal gain? When did I use public interests for personal gain? My Kuraki Academy's recruitment standards are very clear. Those who haven't attained the chi-controlling realm aren't allowed to enter my academy. You're only at the transformation realm, so what wrong did the old man do to disqualify you?" As he said this, his eyes gradually turned cold. "And you publicly hit someone in my Kuraki Academy. You are looking down on my Kuraki Academy. And Guosher is my Kuraki Academy's honorary instructor. The old man believes that even if she were here, she wouldn't allow you to enter Kuraki Academy." At this moment, Li Feng suddenly crawled to his feet. He glared at Yi Xian, who was not far away. His face was filled with savagery and madness. "You lowly bastard, you actually." Before he finished speaking, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Li Xiu's expression changed drastically. But this time, he was clearly prepared. When Yi Xian appeared in front of him, he suddenly threw a punch at Yi Xian. As he punched out, a powerful airflow wrapped around his fist like a mist. Quite powerful. Yi Xian also punched out. The two fists collided. Kacha! Along with the sound of bones breaking, Li Feng was blasted over 10 m away. As soon as he fell to the ground, he started howling madly. The bones in his entire right arm had been completely shattered. Yi Xian glanced coldly at Li Feng, who was howling incessantly. "I'll fucking beat you to death if you say another word." As soon as he finished speaking, he raised his head to look at Zhang Zhong. The latter's expression was icy cold, and his eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. "You acted violently in front of the old man today, and you completely disregard Kuraki Academy. Even an Guosher can't protect you. Guards! Take him away and kill him on the spot." As soon as he finished speaking, two experts at the side were about to attack. Yi Xian looked Zhang Zhong in the eyes. "Even though I haven't attained the Qi resistance realm, Elder Zhang has noticed that I possess the strength of a Qi resistance realm expert." Zhang Zhong ridiculed. "Who cares if you possess the strength of a Qi resistance realm expert? The old man only knows that you haven't attained the Qi resistance realm. Since you haven't attained the Qi resistance realm, then you aren't qualified to participate in my Kuraki Academy's recruitment test." As he spoke, he lightly waved his right hand. "Take him down and kill him on the spot." When they heard Zhang Zhong, the two Void Realm experts before Yi Xian charged directly at Yi Xian. Both of them possessed extremely formidable strengths. At the moment they attacked, Yi Xian felt a strand of invisible pressure. Yi Xian's expression instantly sank when he saw them attack. He knew that the matter couldn't be resolved peacefully. Since it was impossible to resolve peacefully, then he had to fight. When he thought up to here, a wisp of a savage expression arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth, and he suddenly stomped his right foot. Bang! The ground exploded apart, and a strand of formidable pressure swept out from within Yi Xian, causing the two Void Realm experts to be blasted back by over 10 m. A Chi transformation realm expert blasted 2 void realm experts back. Everyone present here was instantly extremely shocked, and they witnessed this scene, or it should be said that they felt disbelief. After all, there was a gap of 2 realms between them. A trace of disbelief could be seen in Song Zhong's eyes as well. He was slightly surprised that Yi Xian was able to completely crush Li Feng, but he wasn't very shocked. After all, even Song Qi had lost at Yi Xian's hands. However, both of them were at the Void Realm. Even though they hadn't utilized their full strength at the beginning, it wasn't something that a Qi transformation realm expert could go against. Song Zhong stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, he naturally understood that this young man before him was absolutely not an ordinary young man, and it could even be said to be a genius, a rare genius. When he thought up to here, Song Zhong was slightly hesitant. Because he was slightly fearful. If he really expelled a genius from Kuraki Academy, then the consequences would definitely be extremely severe. After all, he was only a tiny elder. However, enmity had already been formed, and if Yi Xian was allowed to enter Kuraki Academy, then Yi Xian would definitely take revenge in the future. The revenge of a genius. When he thought up to here, his gaze gradually turned icy cold. A genius? Kuraki Academy never lacked geniuses. I can't leave any future troubles. Song Zhong slowly clenched his right fist. In an instant, a powerful airflow suddenly appeared around Yi Xian, and as soon as this airflow appeared, Yi Xian suddenly noticed that his entire body had started to tense up. Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. Song Zhong wasn't a Void Realm expert at all, but an expert above the Void Realm. He couldn't be defeated by force. When he thought up to here, Yi Xian suddenly clenched his right fist tightly, and then he smashed it forward. Bang! The airflow around him was instantly blasted apart by this punch, and right when Song Zhong was about to attack again, Yi Xian flashed backwards and arrived at the foot of the mountain with a few leaps. A wisp of ridicule arose on the corners of Song Zhong's mouth when he witnessed this scene. Trying to flee? How laughable. As he spoke, he was about to attack. However, right at this moment, Yi Xian charged onto the 9 Palaces formation platform. Seeing this scene, the people halfway up the mountain and at the foot of the mountain were all stunned. Even Song Zhong was stunned. What was he going to do? The moment Yi Xian stepped onto the 9 Palaces platform, it violently shook, and then a beam of light suddenly shot up from the center of the platform into the sky. At this moment, countless people from Kuraki Academy looked up at the sky. 9 Palaces light pillar. Heavens, who is this? He actually wants to challenge the 9 Palaces formation. Could it be Guisher? The 9 Palaces formation. It hasn't been activated for decades. Could it be Guisher? Who exactly is it? Soon, figures ran down from the top of the mountain. The 9 Palaces platform had been activated, and it was obvious that someone wanted to challenge the 9 Palaces formation. On the back of the red-crowned crane, Song Zhong was also stunned. He originally thought that Yi Xian was going to escape, but he didn't expect that Yi Xian would actually go onto the 9 Palaces platform and challenge the 9 Palaces formation. When it was confirmed that Yi Xian was going to challenge the 9 Palaces formation, Song Zhong suddenly laughed. Yi Xian, the old man has finally seen what it means to seek one's own death. That's good, you've saved the old man a lot of trouble by courting death like this. 9 Palaces formation. This formation was formed by 9 wooden puppets. When the 9 wooden puppets attacked together, they could instantly kill a Ascendant Realm expert. Let alone an Ascendant Realm expert, even if he went up there, he didn't have the confidence to break the formation. In fact, he had no confidence at all. This formation didn't just test one's strength, but also one's foundation, temperament, talent, and combat ability. The ancestral master of Kuraki Academy left this formation because he was afraid that Kuraki Academy would lose its talented people, those true talents. Soon, countless people gathered around the 9 Palaces platform. Everyone was looking at Yi Xian on the platform and discussing. Lu Xiaoran led the little fatty and Yi Ling over to the Nine Palaces platform, and his expression changed slightly when he saw Yi Xian. Is Yi Xian going to challenge the Nine Palaces platform? On the other hand, even though Yi Ling, who was wrapped in a thick coat, didn't know what was going on, she was able to sense that it was definitely nothing good. Yi Ling's face was pale and extremely nervous. Uncle Lu, big brother will be fine, right? Lu Xiaoran sighed softly. He glanced at Yi Ling and hesitated for a moment before he said, "Don't worry, he'll be fine." As he spoke, he raised his head and gazed at Yi Xian, but there was a trace of worry in his eyes. The Nine Palaces formation. No one in the entire Jiang Kingdom had been able to successfully challenge the Nine Palaces formation for a few dozen years. Moreover, practically all those who had challenged the Nine Palaces formation had died miserably. Even though he knew that Yi Xian's strength wasn't bad and his origins were mysterious, it was the Nine Palaces formation. As soon as Yi Xian stepped foot onto the Nine Palaces platform, the 9 wooden figures that were standing nearby suddenly seemed as if they'd come to life. They slowly walked over to Yi Xian and surrounded Yi Xian. Yi Xian's face was emotionless, or it should be said that there was killing intent in his eyes. He hadn't expected that the situation would develop to such an extent. Zhang Zhong was clearly targeting him. Fight them head on? This was Kuraki Academy, and even 10,000 of him couldn't defeat it. He had no other choice but to challenge the Nine Palaces formation. Yi Xian discarded the distracting thoughts in his mind and glanced at the surroundings. The 9 wooden figures were holding wooden swords and hadn't moved, but he'd sensed danger. Yi Xian naturally didn't dare act carelessly, and his entire body was on guard. At this moment, one of the wooden figures in front of him suddenly drew its sword, and this sword was aimed straight at the space between Yi Xian's eyebrows. The moment the first wooden figure drew its sword, the crowd was in an uproar. "How is this possible?" someone exclaimed. "The speed of this wooden figure's sword is so fast. Could it be that these 9 wooden figures are all swordsmen? 9 chi-controlling realm sword cultivators. I'm afraid even a levitation realm powerhouse can be killed instantly." On the back of the crane, Zhang Zhong was also a little shocked. He knew that these wooden figures weren't simple, but he didn't expect them to be existences like swordsmen. After all, the Nine Palaces platform hadn't been activated for a very long time. In the blink of an eye, Zhang Zhong smiled. Although these wooden figures were only at the chi-controlling realm, if they were swordsmen, then their terror could no longer be measured by the realm alone. 9 chi-controlling realm swordsman experts, coupled with the support of the formation, were almost invincible in the chi-controlling realm, even in the levitation realm. In the entire younger generation of Jiang country, perhaps only existences at the level of Anguisher could give it a try. As for Yi Xian? Zhang Zhong looked at Yi Xian and sneered. "Yi Xian, if you want to be in the limelight, if you want to make a name for yourself, why don't you take a look at yourself first?" On the Nine Palaces platform, when the first wooden figure drew its sword, Yi Xian's first impression was fast, accurate, and ruthless. However, he was a little surprised, because although this sword was fast, it was very weak. He didn't know why he felt this way, he just felt that it was very weak. In this way, under the gaze of countless people, the wooden sword directly stabbed into Yi Xian's chest. Yi Xian didn't dodge. Everyone was stunned. In the blink of an eye, under everyone's astonished gaze, the wooden sword trembled violently, then turned into a glimmer of light and sank into Yi Xian's body. Almost at the same time, the Lingxiao sword in his body trembled, as if something had happened. Around him, the wooden swords of the remaining 8 wooden figures also arrived in front of Yi Xian. Similarly, he didn't dodge. The moment these wooden swords came into contact with him, they completely disappeared without a trace. Not only the people around him, but even Yi Xian himself was stunned. "Senior? What's going on? Did you make a move?" After a moment of silence, the mysterious woman's voice sounded. "You cultivate the invincible sword body technique, you can devour swords that are weaker than the spiritual sword in your body. Do you understand?" Just as Yi Xian was about to speak, at this moment, Zhang Zhong suddenly shouted angrily. You cheated. Chapter 36. You. Zhang Zhong glared at Yi Xian, his face turning purple with anger. If Yi Xian wasn't on the Nine Palace platform, he would have already made his move. Because Kuraki Academy had a rule that no one was allowed to interfere once someone was on the Nine Palace platform, especially Ashenwood Academy. To put it bluntly, this test was set up by the ancestors of Kuraki Academy to prevent the old teachers from cheating and missing out on the true monstrous geniuses. Thus, even though Zhang Zhong's lungs were about to explode, he didn't dare to make a move. On the Nine Palace platform, Yi Xian didn't pay attention to Zhang Zhong. Instead, he scanned the surroundings and saw that the wooden puppets weren't moving anymore. He thought for a moment and said, Now, I pass, right? Pass. Below the Nine Palace platform, Zhang Zhong sneered, You cheated and destroyed the wooden puppet swords, and you call that passing? You. Yi Xian looked coldly at Zhang Zhong and interrupted him, Cheating? Do you have proof? Zhang Zhong said angrily, Proof? You're just a Qi transformation realm cultivator. How could you make those wooden swords disappear in an instant? And you still say you didn't cheat? Yi Xian looked around and sighed, I finally understand why this array hasn't been broken for so many years. So, breaking the array is cheating. TSK, I've learned something new. All around, there was a lot of discussion. At this time, a Kuraki Academy student suddenly came in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian, You're just a Qi transformation realm cultivator, how could you possibly break this Nine Palace array? Yi Xian looked straight at the student, But I already broke it. The student shook his head, There's definitely something fishy about this. As Elder Zhang Zhong said, You must have used some special method. Hearing this, the surrounding Kuraki Academy students all nodded. They naturally wouldn't believe that someone could break the Nine Palace array, let alone so easily. Because when they first joined Kuraki Academy, they didn't dare to have any thoughts about breaking the Nine Palace array. Even the super monstrous geniuses that led the inner court and inner court of Kuraki Academy weren't able to pass through the Nine Palaces formation. But this man in front of them, how could he? Cheating. Almost everyone was certain that Yi Xian had cheated. Yi Xian glanced at the wooden men around him. At this moment, these wooden men were no longer moving. After pondering for a moment, he asked in his heart, Senior, is this considered cheating? Are you stupid? The mysterious woman suddenly said, Although you haven't comprehended the sword will, your heart of the sword is clear, and you're cultivating the invincible sword body technique, using the sword to forge your body. Although you haven't mastered it yet, you're already a little mature. These wooden puppets can only be considered as low-level swordsmen. Although they're powerful with the help of the formation, you're a genuine great swordsman. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that you're a half-step grandmaster of kendo. Plus, your invincible sword body technique can absorb swords. If they're not swordsmen, you might have to spend more effort, but if they're swordsmen, you're the bane of their existence. Hearing this, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. The reason why he asked that was because he had won too easily. But now that he heard the mysterious woman's words, he finally understood. When he thought up to hear, he gazed at Zhang Zhong and was about to speak. However, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared here, and the students in the surroundings hurriedly bowed deeply and spoke in unison, Vice Dean Li Xiu. Even Zhang Zhong hurriedly bowed. Vice Dean. In the Tsangshan Academy, there were 3 vice deans, and these 3 vice deans were all people with real power. Li Xiu. Yi Xian glanced at Li Xiu, and his heart shuddered. Unfathomable. This man's strength might only be slightly lower than the 9th floor master on the cloud ship. A real big shot had appeared. However, this was also his goal. His goal of challenging the Nine Palace array was to lure the big shot of Green Mountain Academy out. Li Xiu glanced at Zhang Zhong, public affairs are public affairs, private affairs are private affairs. Using public affairs for personal gain is undesirable. From now on, you don't need to be responsible for the recruitment. Go report to the logistics department at the back of the mountain. Hearing this, Li Xiu's face instantly turned pale, and he hurriedly bowed respectfully. Vice Dean, this person hasn't reached the Imperial Qi realm. It wasn't my fault to stop him. Li Xiu interrupted Song Zhong. I don't know what grudges you have with him, but this recruitment is related to the future prosperity of Green Mountain Academy. How can you mix personal grudges with it? Don't say any more. Song Zhong's expression was extremely ugly, but he didn't dare to say anything. But he didn't leave either. He just retreated to the side and stared at Yi Xian. Li Xiu turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian bowed slightly. Greetings, Vice Dean. The Vice Dean sized up Yi Xian. Although I don't know what method you used to destroy those wooden swords, but with your foundation combat power, you are already qualified to join my Verdantwood Academy. Speaking up to here, he suddenly frowned. He seemed to have noticed something. He quickly walked in front of Yi Xian and put a hand on Yi Xian's shoulder. Inside Yi Xian's body, the Ling Shao sword quietly disappeared. Soon, Li Xiu withdrew his hand and looked deeply at Yi Xian. You don't have a dantian. As soon as he said this, everyone was stunned. Song Zhong was also slightly stunned, but in the blink of an eye, he was so happy that he almost laughed crazily. Yi Xian was silent, and he asked in his heart, Senior, why did I put away the Ling Shao sword? Can't I reveal my special dantian to others? Of course not. The mysterious woman said, this method is too shocking. If they find out that you have a sword as your dantian, with your current strength, it is very likely that you will be in great danger, because this is a completely new cultivation method and system. Hearing this, Yi Xian thought for a moment and felt that it was reasonable, so he nodded. I don't have a dantian. Song Zhong suddenly laughed. You don't have a dantian? In other words, you, Yi Xian, can only be a martial artist, a low-level martial artist. What qualifications do you have to join my Green Mountain Academy? Yi Xian ignored Song Zhong and looked at Li Xiu in front of him. After a moment of silence, Li Xiu said, you don't have a dantian, so it will be difficult for you to enter the Xiantian realm. The academy can't give resources to a student without a dantian, so you can't become a student of Green Mountain Academy. However, your foundation is good, so you can stay in the academy and become a martial disciple. Martial disciples were low-level handymen in the academy, who specialized in doing odd jobs for students and teachers. Martial disciple? Yi Xian's face darkened. He naturally wouldn't become a martial disciple. He wanted to join Green Mountain Academy. Just as he was about to release his battle intent, Lu Xiaoran's anxious voice suddenly rang out, Little friend Yi. Yi Xian looked over, and when he saw the appearance of Yi Ling, who was standing next to Lu Xiaoran, his expression instantly changed. At this moment, Yi Ling's head was covered in white frost, and his body emitted waves of cold air. His entire body was like a block of ice. Yi Xian was shocked. He hurriedly ran to Lu Xiaoran and picked up Yi Ling. As soon as he touched Yi Ling, the cold air coming from Yi Ling's body made him shiver. This? At this moment, Yi Xian was panicking out of his wits. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked at Li Xiu, who was not far away, and pleaded, Senior, please let the doctors of Green Mountain Academy take a look at my sister. Li Xiu glanced at Yi Ling and shook his head. There are only 3 medical grandmasters in Green Mountain Academy. How could they come out to treat someone so easily? There were less than 10 medical grandmasters in the entire country of Jiang, and Green Mountain Academy had 3. These people could be said to be national treasures, and it was too difficult to invite them. Even he might not be able to invite a medical grandmaster, and even if he could, he would have to pay a certain price. And the young man in front of him had no value at all. How could he pay a certain price to invite a medical grandmaster? Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but Li Xiu shook his head. Your dantian has been shattered, and you can only advance beyond the Qi Change realm for the rest of your life. If you're willing, you can stay in Green Mountain Academy and become a martial disciple. If you're unwilling, leave immediately. With that, he flicked his sleeves and left. Yi Xian, whose dantian had been shattered, had no value to Green Mountain Academy. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly hugged Yi Ling, whose aura was getting weaker and weaker, and stood in front of Li Xiu. Yi Xian knelt on one knee and looked at Li Xiu with bloodshot eyes. If Green Mountain Academy is willing to save my sister, I, Yi Xian, will go through water and tread on fire for Green Mountain Academy, even if I have to die 10,000 times. Li Xiu looked at Yi Xian, and after a moment, his eyes gradually turned cold. You're not qualified. With that, he turned and walked up the mountain. Yi Xian still wanted to say something, but at this moment, brother, Yi Ling, who was in Yi Xian's arms, suddenly said in pain, "No, don't treat him. Brother, hurry up and get up." Tears kept flowing from Yi Ling's eyes, and these tears were actually icy blue. Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian tightly. She felt wronged, not for herself, but for her brother. When had her brother ever knelt to someone before? No, she really didn't want to treat him anymore. Yi Xian sat on the ground, hugging Yi Ling, who was getting colder and colder. He hugged her tightly, and his whole body trembled. The tears in his eyes were like a broken dam, and he cried like a child, "I'm sorry. Brother, I'm useless. I'm sorry." In Yi Xian's arms, Yi Ling pressed her head against Yi Xian's chest. The coldness in her body was getting stronger, but her aura was getting weaker and weaker. Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian tightly, and she raised her head to look at Yi Xian, and squeezed out a smile. "Brother, don't cry. I'm already very happy to die in my brother's arms." Yi Xian hugged Yi Ling tightly, and his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. Inside his body, Ling Xiao's sword kept trembling, and his whole body was already on the verge of collapse. Yi Ling held Yi Xian's cheeks with both hands, and looked at Yi Xian. As she looked, she suddenly smiled. "Brother, after I die, bring my ashes with you. I want to accompany you for the rest of my life. Also, live well, you must live well." As she said that, she slowly closed her eyes, and her aura became weaker and weaker. "Brother, in my next life, I'll still be your little sister." Chapter 37. Yi Ling's breath became weaker and weaker until it was almost undetectable. Yi Xian hugged Yi Ling tightly as his body trembled uncontrollably. At the corner of his mouth, blood continuously flowed out. All around, countless people stared at the pair of brother and sister. Looking at Yi Xian and his sister, Lu Xiaoran's expression was complicated. He didn't expect things to turn out this way. He didn't expect that Yi Xian didn't have a dantian. Without a dantian, it meant that he would never be able to condense qi for the rest of his life. At this moment, Song Zhong suddenly sneered, "Someone come, chase this pair of brother and sister down Song Mountain." Just as several experts rushed towards Yi Xian and his sister, an old man quietly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The old man's hair was unkempt, his clothes were tattered, and his body exuded a pungent smell of alcohol. Seeing the sudden appearance of this old man, Song Zhong frowned because he didn't know how this old man appeared. The strong men who had been dashing toward Yi Xian and his younger sister also stopped. Song Zhong stared at the old man. "Who are you?" The old man didn't answer Song Zhong, but looked at Yi Xian and his sister. He sized up Yi Ling and said, "I can save her." Hearing this, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. The old man looked straight at Yi Xian. "Are you willing to enter my Canglan Academy?" Canglan Academy? The crowd was in an uproar. This was Canglan Academy's mortal enemy. No, the current Canglan Academy was no longer qualified to beat Canglan Academy's opponent. Song Zhong stared at the old man. "You are from Canglan Academy." The old man ignored Song Zhong and only looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian stared straight at the old man. "As long as you can save my sister, I, Yi Xian, will not let down Canglan Academy." The old man pointed at Song Shan with his right hand. From the foot of the mountain, there are a total of 36 corpses of Canglan Academy's students. Every one of them died miserably. In the future, you may become one of them. Yi Xian looked straight at the old man. As long as you can save my sister, I, Yi Xian, will have no regrets even if I become one of them. The old man looked at Yi Xian for a long time. Did you bring back the corpses hanging on the Shao Dao in Song Mountain? Yi Xian looked straight at the old man. If you can save my sister, in this life, I will do everything in my power. The old man took a deep look at Yi Xian. From now on, you are a student of my Tsanglan Academy. After saying that, he squatted down and placed one hand on Yi Ling's pulse. After a moment, he took a deep look at Yi Ling without saying anything. His thumb gently touched a pitch-black ring on his index finger. In the blink of an eye, a tiny flame lotus appeared in his palm. Along with the appearance of this flame lotus, the surrounding temperature suddenly rose. Fire spirit! Someone in the crowd exclaimed. Zhang Zhong's face was also filled with astonishment. In this world, there were some natural oddities, and these natural oddities were extremely precious existences. For example, this fire spirit was a priceless existence. No, this wasn't something that could be bought with money. Even in Sangmu Academy, this kind of natural oddities was extremely rare. Under everyone's gaze, the old man flicked his finger and the fire spirit directly entered between Yi Ling's eyebrows. Soon, the cold air on Yi Ling's body receded like a receding tide. The old man's right hand was tightly placed on Yi Ling's shoulder. A mysterious force was continuously transmitted into Yi Ling's body. Gradually, under the nervous gaze of Yi Xian, Yi Ling's face became a little rosy. Yi Xian was overjoyed when he witnessed this scene. After around 15 minutes, Yi Ling slowly opened her eyes. Yi Xian hurriedly grabbed Yi Ling's hand and spoke in a trembling voice. How is it? Yi Ling glanced at the surroundings in a daze. In the end, she looked at Yi Xian, and tears flowed down her face. Big brother, I'm not dead yet? Yi Xian smiled, but his face was covered in tears. Meanwhile, a tiny flame suddenly condensed between Yi Ling's eyebrows. The old man said, the fire spirit has temporarily suppressed the cold air within her body. But according to my estimation, it can only suppress it for a month at most. After a month, the fire spirit will vanish. Yi Xian pulled his younger sister, Yi Ling, up, and Yi Ling bowed deeply to the old man. Yi Xian said, I, Yi Xian, will remember this kindness for the rest of my life. The old man nodded slightly. Come back to Tsanglan Academy with me. Yi Xian nodded. All right. The three of them were about to leave when Zhang Zhong suddenly ridiculed. How laughable. The Tsanglan Academy has actually fallen to the point of picking up the trash that my Kuraki Academy doesn't want. Oh, it's understandable. After all, who would join Tsanglan Academy now? The old man glanced at Zhang Zhong, but he didn't speak and just ignored Zhang Zhong. Just like that, under the gaze of countless people, the old man left with Yi Xian and his younger sister. Zhang Zhong laughed without the slightest restraint behind the old man. How laughable. How laughable. The Tsanglan Academy has fallen to the point of picking up the trash that my Kuraki Academy doesn't want. Ha ha ha. Right at this moment, a white figure suddenly flashed over from afar, and everyone here was stunned when they saw this white figure. It's an Guesher. Someone spoke these words, and the surroundings instantly seethed with excitement. An Guesher. He was the representative of the younger generation of the Jiang Kingdom, and he could be said to be the idol of everyone in the younger generation of the Jiang Kingdom. Countless people gazed at the white figure with burning gazes, and their eyes were filled with admiration and respect. Because Enlancio was the pride of the entire Jiang Kingdom. She was outstanding to the point others couldn't feel envious of her. Everyone watched as Enlancio stopped before the old man and Yi Xian, and then her gaze descended onto Yi Xian. I'm sorry. Yi Xian shook his head. It's none of your business. Enlancio stretched out her right hand. The jade pendant. Yi Xian hesitated for a moment before he said, I'll keep it. Enlancio looked Yi Xian in the eyes. Why? Yi Xian met her gaze. It's a form of friendship. And Lanxiu gazed at Yi Xian for a long time before she nodded, and then she gazed at the old man by Yi Xian's side. The old man glanced at Lanxiu and sighed softly. As expected of the most outstanding person in the Jiang kingdom. You've already arrived at such a level. And Lanxiu fell silent for a short moment. The Jiang kingdom can't fall into chaos. The old man shook his head and chuckled. 36 corpses are still hanging on that Shao Dao. And Lanxiu fell silent. The old man didn't say anything else. He turned around and walked down the mountain. Yi Xian cupped his fists towards Lanxiu. Farewell. As she finished speaking, she pulled Yi Ling along and followed after him. And Lanxiu's eyes slowly closed where she stood. Meanwhile, Cang Zhong hurriedly walked in front of Lanxiu and bowed respectfully. Teacher and I. Right at this moment, Cang Zhong suddenly flew over 10 meters away. Everyone was shocked. They looked at Lanxiu with eyes filled with puzzlement. Because the person who attacked was Lanxiu. And Lanxiu glanced coldly at Cang Zhong, who was over 10 meters away. You dare to make things difficult for someone I recommended? Cang Zhong was horrified in his heart. He was about to say something when a spear tore through the air. Chi! One of Cang Zhong's arms flew off. Blood sprayed. The surroundings were deathly silent. Everyone looked at Lanxiu with astonishment. What's she doing? Under everyone's gaze, Lanxiu raised her head and looked at Song Mountain. Li Xiu, get down here. As her voice fell, she lightly flicked her jade-like finger. A silver spear soared into the sky. Around the silver spear, an enormous dragon that was over 100 meters long suddenly appeared. The enormous dragon soared into Tsang Mountain. A dragon's roar shook the entire Tsang Mountain. A moment of silence. Boom! Above Tsang Mountain, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly resounded. Then, a horrified voice sounded. Spear intent manifestation. You've actually reached the Spear Dao Grandmaster, Spear Dao Grandmaster. As soon as these words came out, the surroundings were filled with gasps. Spear Dao Grandmaster. And Lanxiu had already reached the Spear Dao Grandmaster. She was only 19 years old. A 19-year-old Spear Dao Grandmaster. Everyone was petrified. Not to mention the history of the Jiang Kingdom, even the history of the previous dynasty had never seen such a thing. In the truest sense of the word, it was unprecedented. In next to no time, Li Xiu appeared before Lanxiu, and his expression was extremely serious. A Spear Dao Grandmaster wasn't terrifying. What was terrifying was a Spear Dao Grandmaster at such a young age. In the history of Kuraki Academy, only a single person could compare to such terrifying natural talent, and it was Gu Qianshan who'd saved Kuraki Academy all those years ago. That legendary figure of Kuraki Academy. Yet now, Lanxiu wasn't inferior to him in the slightest. Li Xiu restrained his thoughts. Country scholarin, why are you so angry? Lanxiu glanced at Li Xiu. I can't stand the sight of you. As soon as she finished speaking, the tip of her foot tapped the ground lightly, and her figure directly floated forward. At the same time, the spear in her hand shot out violently like a bolt of lightning. Li Xiu's gaze was wretched as he stood before Lanxiu, and he didn't dare be careless in the slightest. He took half a step back, and in the next moment, he stretched out his right hand and made a roll. This roll caused the wind in the surroundings to suddenly and swiftly converge towards him. In an instant, a whirlpool had appeared before him, and within the whirlpool were countless wind blades that were thin like cicada wings. Meanwhile, the spear arrived. Bang! An enormous bang that shook the heavens resounded abruptly. In the blink of an eye, the countless wind blades were blasted into pieces while a figure retreated explosively. This figure was exactly Li Xiu, and he'd retreated over 100 m back. As soon as he stopped moving, a wisp of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. At the same time, his entire right arm had cracked apart into the shape of a spiderweb. The surroundings were deathly silent. and Lanxiu had defeated a vice dean of Kuraki Academy. Everyone in the surroundings didn't know Li Xiu's true cultivation, but since he was able to become the vice dean of Kuraki Academy, then how could he be trash? It could be said that Li Xiu was at least at the Nether Passage realm, or perhaps even higher. Yet now, he'd lost to Lanxiu. Li Xiu stared fixedly at Lanxiu. There was no flames of rage in his eyes, and there was only deep fear. Others didn't know what Lanxiu's background represented, but he did. So, when Lanxiu hadn't joined Kuraki Academy all those years ago, Kuraki Academy didn't dare go too far. After all, when it came to a level like Kuraki Academy, some geniuses were either roped in or destroyed. On the other hand, Kuraki Academy didn't dare to have any ill intentions towards Lanxiu. Lanxiu didn't attack again. She glanced at Grey Mountain and shook her head. From this moment onward, I have nothing to do with Kuraki Academy. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned around and left. Li Xiu's expression changed drastically when he heard Lanxiu. Country scholar, you absolutely can't do that. If I've offended you in any way, then I apologize. Please. In the distance, Lanxiu had vanished from everyone's fields of vision. Li Xiu's expression was extremely unsightly as he stood on the spot. Right at this moment, the 8 wooden figures on the distant 9 palace platforms suddenly returned to their positions, and then a figure suddenly appeared on the platform in the blink of an eye. The expressions of everyone in the surroundings changed drastically when they saw this figure. Because this figure was Gu Qianchen, who'd left the kingdom of Jiang for almost 300 years. Along with Gu Qianchen's appearance, all the higher-ups of Kuraki Academy were alarmed. Besides the dean who was in closed-door cultivation, the other 2 vice deans and some supreme elders had rushed over to the platform, and then they bowed in succession. Gu Qianchen glanced at the surroundings and grinned. It's rare that I'm late. Where's the person who broke the formation? His foundation is solid like a rock at such a young age. Not only has he comprehended battle intent, he's even a great swordsman. It's rare that he's cultivated both the martial arts and the sword to such an extent. Chapter 38. 3 words were rare. The surroundings were deathly silent. Gu Qianchen frowned slightly when he noticed the unusual atmosphere, and then he glanced at the surroundings. What's wrong? Meanwhile, Li Xiu stepped forward, bowed deeply to Gu Qianchen, and then recounted everything that had happened earlier. He didn't dare conceal anything at all. The surroundings grew even more silent after he finished listening. Some of the supreme elders and vice deans of Kuraki Academy glanced coldly at Li Xiu with extremely hostile expressions. If Gu Qianchen's afterimage wasn't here, then they might have flared up by now. A short while later, Gu Qianchen shook his head lightly. This formation was created by Dean Mu all those years ago. Later on, I felt that it was slightly weak, so I transformed it into a swordsman. Even if he cheated, he's still capable of breaking through this formation. Moreover, that person didn't cheat. Even though he doesn't have a dantian, it means that he's extraordinary and should be said to be terrifying. Don't all of you think it's terrifying that he was able to break through this formation without a dantian? Li Xiu's face turned slightly pale when he heard this, and his face turned even paler when he recalled Lanxiu's attitude from before. Who was Lanxiu? With such a terrifying genius, would the person she favored be mediocre? Of course not. Li Xiu laughed bitterly when he thought up to this point, and then he bowed deeply to Gu Qianchen. I was blind. Gu Qianchen shook his head. Fate can't be forced. As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. I left Pine Prefecture a few hundred years ago, and I left this afterimage behind because I wanted to see if anyone would be able to break through the formation that Dean Mu and I left behind in a short period of time. I never expected that it would be like this. Forget it. It's difficult for me to interfere in the matters of Kuraki Academy now. All of you, good luck. As soon as he finished speaking, his figure gradually became ethereal. Everyone hurriedly bowed deeply when they witnessed this scene. Farewell, Dean Gu. It didn't take long for Gu Qianchen's afterimage to vanish completely. The other two vice deans, the instructors, and the elders gazed at Li Xiu. Li Xiu laughed bitterly. From this moment onward, I'll go meditate on the cliff of reflection. Once the dean emerges from his closed-door cultivation, I'll be at his disposal. As he spoke, he looked at a white-haired old man not far away. Brother Mo Song, I'll leave everything in the academy to you for the time being. Mo Song was the other vice dean of Karaki Academy. Mo Song sighed in a low voice. This time, you really didn't handle this well. Forget it, there's no point in saying anything now. Go reflect on the cliff of reflection and wait for the dean to come out, wait. Right at this moment, another black-robed old man suddenly stood out. He was the other vice dean of Karaki Academy, Kumu. The others in the surroundings gazed at Kumu when they heard him. Kumu said coldly, he's just a pretty good monster. Him not being able to join our Karaki Academy is his loss, not ours. Forgive me for speaking bluntly, but that person doesn't have the qualifications for us to punish a vice principal. Everyone fell silent. Kumu continued. If my Karaki Academy were to punish Li Xiu, then wouldn't we become the laughingstock of the world? Moreover, although he's not bad, he doesn't have the qualifications to make my Karaki Academy sacrifice a vice dean. Send the order that Yi Xian is trash that my Karaki Academy doesn't want. We want the world to know that no matter how monstrous a genius he is, he's still trash before our Karaki Academy. The elders and instructors of Karaki Academy exchanged glances. Some were hesitant, but some immediately expressed their agreement. Kumu continued. Since the establishment of Dean Gu, when has our Karaki Academy ever lowered our heads to anyone? We didn't in the past, and we won't in the future. As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. Students of Karaki Academy, remember that Yi Xian has joined Karaki Academy. Next year, I want all of you to hang his head on the Shao Dao. Our Karaki Academy wants the world to know that not joining our Karaki Academy is the greatest loss Yi Xian has ever suffered in his lifetime. Countless students of Karaki Academy bowed and spoke in unison. We'll definitely hang Yi Xian's head on the Shao Dao. Kumu nodded lightly when he heard this, and the other elders including Li Xiu and the others nodded successively as well. Soon, the news that Yi Xian had joined Karaki Academy spread throughout the capital. Someone that Karaki Academy didn't want had been picked up by Karaki Academy. Yi Xian's name spread throughout the capital. Of course, it wasn't a good reputation, but a joke. Not only had Yi Xian become a joke, but even Karaki Academy had become a joke. Karaki Academy has come to pick up the students that Karaki Academy doesn't want. This sentence was spreading throughout the entire imperial capital. Karaki Academy's fame and popularity once again reached its peak. On a remote mountain path, Yi Xian carried Yi Ling on his back and followed closely behind an old man not far away from him. The old man would take a few gulps of wine from his gourd every few steps. Brother. My body feels warm. Comfortable? Yes. That's good. Brother, promise me that you won't kneel down for me in the future, okay? Yi Xian fell silent. Yi Ling tightly wrapped her arms around Yi Xian's neck. Brother, I'd rather die than have you kneel down for others. I'd rather kneel down for the world than have you die. Brother, in the next life, I'll still be your little sister, okay? No, in the next life, the next life, the next life. A quarter of an hour later, the old man in the distance stopped. Yi Xian also stopped. Not far away from the three of them were two small mountains. They weren't very tall, only a few hundred meters tall. Compared to Karaki Academy's Tsang Mountain, they were pitifully small. In between the two small mountain peaks, there was a small path. Beside the small path, there was a stone tablet. The stone tablet was surrounded by overgrown weeds, and on top of the stone tablet, there were 4 big black words, Tsanglan Academy. These 4 words were somewhat desolate. Under the old man's guidance, Yi Xian carried his little sister through the Shao Dao. At the end of the Shao Dao was another mountain, but it wasn't very tall. It was only slightly taller than the two mountains behind them. At the top of this mountain, some buildings could be vaguely seen. The old man walked forward slowly, while Yi Xian carried his little sister and followed. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, "I can't remember how many years it has been. You're the first person who was willing to join Karaki Academy." Behind the old man, Yi Xian was slightly stunned. In an instant, he said in astonishment, "Senior, may I ask, how many students are there in Karaki Academy? Including you, too?" The old man didn't even turn his head. Yi Xian was stunned in place. After a while, he hurriedly carried his little sister to the old man's side. "Senior, are you sure you're not joking?" The old man glanced at Yi Xian. "Do you think I'm joking with you?" "No," Yi Xian gulped, "you. Karaki Academy, including me, really only has 2 students?" The old man nodded. Seeing that the old man didn't seem to be joking, Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Senior. 2 people. This." He was already somewhat speechless. The old man lightly patted Yi Xian's shoulder. "Don't worry, I've already recruited." "Oh no, I've already recruited 2 more people. They'll be arriving soon. At that time, Karaki Academy will have 4 people." After saying that, he walked towards the distant mountain peak. Yi Xian was stunned in place. On Yi Xian's back, Yiling glanced at the old man in the distance and said softly, "Brother, it seems like you've been tricked." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "He saved you. For this, brother is willing to jump into any trap." After saying that, he carried Yiling on his back and hurriedly followed. Soon, under the old man's lead, the 3 of them arrived at the mountain peak. At the mountain peak, there was only a dilapidated hall and a dozen or so houses. The paint on the outside of the hall had almost peeled off, and there were even a few large cracks on the walls. Not only that, the hall only had 1 door. And at a glance, there were weeds everywhere. Yi Xian turned to look at the old man. The old man said, "Karaki Hall is where we usually discuss matters and entertain guests. However, it's been many years since it's been used for such matters. It's a little abandoned, clean it up later." Yi Xian, the old man pointed to the back of the hall. "The houses over there are all empty. You can find any one to stay in. I'm a little tired, so I'll go rest first." After saying that, the old man disappeared without looking back. In the same place, Yi Xian carried Yiling on his back and looked at the dilapidated hall in front of him, speechless for a long time. He knew that Karaki Academy might not be that good, but he didn't expect it to be this bad. No, it's not just bad, it's practically going to close down. An old man of unknown identity and 2 students. Is this King Academy? It's probably an orphanage. After a long time, Yi Xian sighed softly. At this time, Yiling suddenly jumped down from his back and pulled Yi Xian's hand. "Brother, go choose our rooms. I'll clean this hall." Yi Xian was a little hesitant. Yiling jumped on the spot and giggled. "It's not cold anymore. Brother, go quickly, I'll be fine." Seeing that Yiling didn't seem to be lying, Yi Xian nodded. He gently rubbed Yiling's little head. "Take your time. Brother will go pick 2 rooms and find something to eat. Then I'll help you." Yiling nodded obediently. Yi Xian smiled and turned to leave. As for Yiling, he entered the hall and found a broom to start sweeping. About 100 feet behind the main hall, there were buildings scattered all over the place. From the outside, these buildings must have been very glorious in the past, but now, they were simply unsightly, especially the house in front of him. Half of the roof had disappeared. Yi Xian shook his head and walked through the xiaodao that was already covered with weeds. Suddenly, he stopped because not far from his right, there was a decent courtyard. This courtyard wasn't as dilapidated as the courtyards in front of him, and there were some flowers and plants around it. It looked very good. Yi Xian was delighted. "I can let my sister live here." After saying that, he walked over quickly. Soon, he pushed the door open and entered. The moment he pushed the door open, he was stunned. Not far in front of him, there was a pool. At this moment, in the pool, a woman was leaning against the wall of the pool. Her legs were stretched out in a shape. The water was very clear, so clear that he could see everything at the bottom of the pool. Of course, this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that the woman was naked. The woman just looked at Yi Xian calmly. Yi Xian was stunned and then turned around. At this moment, he felt a terrifying aura coming from behind him. Then, a blade as thin as a cicada's wing was placed on his neck. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He quickly raised his hands. I only like men. P.S. New writing is very slow and very serious. Therefore, it's impossible to write a lot in a day. If I write too much, it must be nonsense. Therefore, many people ask me to add more chapters. This concubine can't do that. The only thing I can do is to update steadily and add chapters from time to time. I hope everyone can understand. Chapter 39. At this moment, time seemed to freeze. Yi Xian's expression was grave, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. The strength of the woman behind him had exceeded his expectations. If he had not turned around just now, he might have been able to fight against her. However, because he had turned around, he had lost the initiative and was now in a dilemma. After a moment of silence, the knife on his neck suddenly disappeared. Yi Xian immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Yi Xian did not leave. He turned around and saw that the woman had already put on her clothes. The woman was wearing a long black dress with mountains and rivers painted on it. She had a slender figure and a black sash was tied around her waist, accentuating her slender figure. Her eyes were like water, but they carried a faint coldness, as if they could see through everything. So beautiful. That was Yi Xian's first impression and feeling. When he thought of some of the scenes from before, Yi Xian immediately felt a little hot. Although he, Yi Xian, had never been close to a woman, it did not mean that he was not a man. He had everything that a normal man should have. The woman slowly walked in front of Yi Xian. She just looked at Yi Xian, causing Yi Xian's scalp to go numb. Yi Xian and the woman looked at each other, and in his eyes, there was only disgust. It was as if looking at a woman's body was a very shameful thing. The Jiang country was not very open-minded, and women were very concerned about their innocence. Yi Xian also knew this. The reason why he was like this was naturally because he wanted to avoid trouble. Moreover, this matter was mainly because he was in the wrong. However, he also felt very wronged. Only the heavens knew that there were other people here, and this woman was bathing in broad daylight. However, she was really beautiful. If he could look at her a few more times, he would not mind. As soon as this thought appeared in his mind, he was shocked. Did he want to look at her a few more times? At this moment, the woman suddenly spoke. Who are you? Her voice was cold, and there was a trace of killing intent in her eyes. Yi Xian hurriedly collected his thoughts and said, Yi Xian, new student. After saying this, he took a few steps back. It did not seem like he was trying to escape, but rather to get away from the woman. Moreover, there was a hint of disgust in his eyes. Noticing Yi Xian's actions, the woman frowned. Am I that unsightly? Yi Xian glanced at the woman and didn't say anything. However, he took 2 steps back. This was enough to explain everything. The woman sized up Yi Xian and shook her head. You're a handsome man, but you're gay. How do men get along with men? Yi Xian was speechless. Seeing that Yi Xian did not answer, the woman did not pursue the matter. She looked at Yi Xian with pity, then turned around and walked to her room. Seeing that the woman had left, Yi Xian instantly heaved a sigh of relief. This matter was over. Yi Xian hurriedly left the courtyard and found 2 rooms at the side. After cleaning the rooms, he went to the back mountain for a stroll. When he returned, he already had some game in his hands. Surviving in the wild was something that Yi Xian was very, very good at because he had once relied on hunting game to support himself and his sister. Yi Xian arrived at Kanglan Palace. At this moment, Yi Ling had already cleaned up the palace. Seeing Yi Xian, Yi Ling hurriedly ran to Yi Xian and smiled sweetly. "Brother." Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. "Tired?" Yi Ling shook her head. "Not tired." Yi Xian smiled. "Clean up the tables at the side. Brother will go cook." Hearing this, Yi Ling's eyes lit up with anticipation. Cook. She loved eating Yi Xian's cooking the most, and it could be said that even the chefs of the Yi family couldn't compare to Yi Xian's cooking. An hour later, in Kanglan Palace, Yi Xian and his sister Yi Ling sat before a large shabby table. There were 4 or 5 appetizers on the table, and their fragrance assailed their nostrils. The siblings looked at each other and smiled. Just as they were about to pick up their chopsticks, a figure walked over from the side. It was the old man. The old man's entire body emitted an unpleasant smell of alcohol. His clothes seemed as if they hadn't been washed for many years, and his original appearance was unrecognizable. The old man didn't stand on ceremony and sat at the head of the table. He was just about to pick up his chopsticks when another person walked over from the side. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched when he saw who it was. It was the woman he'd met earlier. The woman sat on the old man's left. She glanced at the dishes on the table, and then looked at Yi Xian. "Did you cook for me?" Yi Xian. Yi Ling blinked. She glanced at Yi Xian, and then at the woman. The woman didn't say anything else. She picked up her chopsticks and picked up a small piece of mushroom. After a while, she nodded. "Not bad." Hearing this, the old man picked up a piece of mushroom and put it in his mouth. After chewing, he glanced at Yi Xian and nodded. "All right. From now on, Kanglan Academy's meals will be yours." The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. He wanted to beat someone up. At this moment, Yi Ling suddenly tilted her head and looked at the old man. "But my brother is a student." The old man glanced at Yi Ling. Cooking is also a form of cultivation. Yi Ling, Yi Xian couldn't stand it anymore. "Senior, Dean." The old man turned to look at Yi Xian. "Call me Dean, Dean Ji." Yi Xian nodded. "Dean Ji, for such a big academy, shouldn't we hire a few handymen?" The old man asked in return, "Are you paying?" Yi Xian was stunned for a while before saying, "Shouldn't you be paying?" Dean Ji shook his head. "I don't have money. I can't even afford to drink." Yi Xian, the woman didn't say anything. She just ate. She kept on eating. The speed at which she ate made Yi Xian and his sister dumbfounded. That speed was really abnormally fast. It was as if she hadn't eaten for more than 10 days. After a while, all the dishes on the table were swept clean. The woman licked her chopsticks. Then she turned to look at Yi Xian. "Is there anything else?" Yi Xian, Yi Ling put down her chopsticks. Then she said, "There's still something left. I'll go wash it." After saying that, she turned and ran to the back of the hall. Yi Xian asked in a low voice, "Is it safe here?" Old man Ji nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian hesitated. Then he asked again, "Dean Ji, since it's an academy, there's naturally a place to learn." "No." Old man Ji answered directly. "Self-study." Yi Xian, Martial Arts Hall. At this moment, the woman suddenly said. She was still licking her chopsticks. Old man Ji looked at Yi Xian. "There's a martial arts hall in the back mountain. There are some martial arts notes left by former students. As for martial arts techniques, if you're lucky, you might be able to find 1 or 2. Sigh. Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. I'll go cook. After saying that, he turned and left. Next to the table, only the woman and the old man were left. The woman put down her chopsticks. Where did you find it? Old man Ji took a sip of wine and said, I picked it up at Kuraki Academy. The woman was silent for a moment. Then she asked again, why him? The old man said, he has potential. The woman said indifferently, I alone am enough. The old man's hand trembled slightly. After a moment, he picked up the wine gourd and took a sip. Then he said softly, Ji, you're carrying too much. The woman said indifferently, this is my life and also my responsibility. After saying that, she turned to look outside the hall. Although they're dead, their souls are imprisoned in their bodies. As long as they're not brought back, they won't be able to rest in peace. And big brother, second brother. Father, the old man slowly closed his eyes. You're the only bloodline of the Ji family. The woman chuckled. Then I'm even more duty-bound. The old man shook his head. Those two, in the country of Jiang, probably only in Lanxiao can suppress them. The woman stood up. Where there's a will, there's a will. After saying that, she walked into the distance. When she reached the entrance of the hall, she suddenly stopped and said with a smile, the worst outcome is just another corpse of Tsang Mountain's Xiao Dao. After saying that, she disappeared into the distance. Inside the hall, only the sound of the old man drinking wine could be heard. At night, after Yi Ling fell asleep, Yi Xian entered the World Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground and asked, Senior, am I a great swordsman? Yes. The mysterious woman answered. Why? Yi Xian was a little puzzled because he still hadn't been able to release sword light. The mysterious woman said, what you're lacking now is only the realm. As long as you reach the qi-resisting realm and condense the qi in your body, with your current body foundation and your attainments in the sword, you can use sword qi at any time. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, then my battle intent, do you know martial arts? The mysterious woman asked. Yi Xian shook his head. The mysterious woman said, your current situation is that you've comprehended battle intent in advance, but you haven't gone through the process of martial arts, so you're not a martial arts grandmaster at all. Moreover, to become a real martial arts grandmaster, you still need to materialize battle intent. The current you doesn't have that ability yet. What you need to do now is to accumulate the basic knowledge of martial arts. Of course, you can't slack off on your swordsmanship. Also, you can start looking for swords. Spiritual swords. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. Where was he going to look for spiritual swords? Buy? He couldn't afford it. This was a big problem. After a while, Yi Xian began to cultivate. Apart from practicing his swordsmanship, he also practiced his fists and kicks. The only martial technique he knew was the collapsing fist. After adding the battle will, he discovered that the power of the collapsing fist had undergone a qualitative change. If he added battle intent, the collapsing fist would be at least lower mystic level. At this moment, he truly realized how terrifying battle intent was, and if he comprehended sword intent, then the might of the deciding life and death sword would probably be even more terrifying. The night passed, and Yi Xian suddenly rushed down the mountain at dawn the next day. Because old man Ji told him that a woman surnamed An was looking for him. In next to no time, Yi Xian arrived at the foot of the mountain, and Yi Xian saw a woman in white clothes that were spotless. She was breathtakingly beautiful. An Lanxiao. Yi Xian walked over to An Lanxiao and smiled, Miss An. An Lanxiao nodded and was about to speak when a sloppy man walked over from nearby. The man carried a black iron rod on his back, and he walked unsteadily. When the man saw An Lanxiao, his eyes instantly lit up, beautiful, a beauty. Yi Xian suddenly stood in front of An Lanxiao and glanced at the man, I'm pretty handsome too. You can watch for free. Chapter 40. And Lanxiu, who stood behind Yi Xian, glanced at Yi Xian and didn't speak. On the other hand, the man who stood before Yi Xian sized up Yi Xian and said, "Kid, it looks to me like you're asking for a beating." As soon as he finished speaking, the man suddenly smashed his iron rod towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian clenched his right fist tightly, and battle intent condensed on his fist. He punched. Hiss. The sound of an explosion suddenly rang out. Bang. Along with this explosion, the man was pushed over 10 back along with his iron rod, and his pitch-black iron rod was trembling violently. On the other hand, Yi Xian had moved over 3 back as well, and his right hand was trembling slightly. The man who stood before Yi Xian glanced at his iron rod, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. "You have some ability." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly tossed his iron rod towards Yi Xian. Hiss. A sharp whistle resounded through the air. Yi Xian's face was emotionless. When the iron rod arrived before him, he suddenly smashed his right fist forward. It was just a simple punch. Fist crush. A single punch could shatter metal and shatter rocks. Bang! The iron rod shook violently and was blasted flying back. However, right at this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and in the blink of an eye, a strand of cold light shot towards Yi Xian's throat. Danger! Yi Xian's eyes narrowed slightly. This was his first feeling, and he didn't dare conceal it any longer. He twisted his right hand lightly. OM. A low and heavy sword howl resounded, and in the blink of an eye. Bang! A silhouette was forced to retreat over 100 feet. It was that man. After the man stopped moving, he gazed at Yi Xian with astonishment. "Swordsman. You're actually a swordsman." Yi Xian glanced at the man. "Do you still want to fight me?" The man chuckled. "Yes, of course. When have I, Mo Yinchi, ever feared anyone in my lifetime?" Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. In the next moment, a cold light flashed. The man called Mo Yinchi's expression changed greatly. "You didn't even say anything before starting the fight." As he spoke, he swung the iron rod in his hand upwards. Hard, hard, hard. Bang! An ear-piercing sound of metal clashing rang out, and in the blink of an eye, Mo Yinchi's entire body was pushed back a distance of over 100 feet. This time, Yi Xian didn't attack again. Instead, he retreated to Lanxiu's side and glanced at her. "I forgot myself." Lan smiled without saying a word. Yi Xian's expression was rather unnatural, or rather, slightly embarrassed. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly looked towards the nearby Mo Yinchi and said, "Let's continue fighting." As soon as he finished speaking, he charged out. Mo Yinchi, and Lanxiu glanced at the distant Yi Xian. It was unknown what she was thinking. After around 10 minutes passed, a voice suddenly resounded, "That's enough." It was Old Man Ji's voice. As soon as this voice resounded, Old Man Ji appeared not too far away from Lanxiu. He nodded slightly to her, and then he gazed at Yi Xian and Mo Yinchi. However, they didn't stop. Old Man Ji suddenly gazed at Lanxiu. "Guoshuren, do you really care about him?" Of course, he was referring to Yi Xian. Lanxiu lightly combed her hair behind her ear. "Yes." Old Man Ji's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard this. "Guoshuren, do you know what you're talking about?" Lanxiu chuckled lightly. "Just because he dared to stand before a few thousand troops of the Tang Empire, he's qualified to be my friend. Of course, we're friends now." "Friend." Old Man Ji sighed lightly. In the entire kingdom of Jiang, there were probably less than a handful of people who were qualified to be friends with this little girl. Bang! Meanwhile, an explosion suddenly resounded from afar, and then Mo Yinchi was blasted over 30 m away. Yi Xian didn't attack again, and he retreated to Lanxiu's side instead. Mo Yinchi glanced at Yi Xian and Lanxiu, and he didn't attack as well. Old Man Ji glanced at Mo Yinchi. both of you are students of Tsanglan Academy from now on. Both Yi Xian and Mo Yinchi were stunned. Students of Tsanglan Academy? Mo Yinchi pointed at Yi Xian. He's a student of Tsanglan Academy as well? Old man Ji spoke indifferently. What? Is there a problem? Mo Yinchi glanced at old man Ji. Old man, how many students are there in our Tsanglan Academy? Old man Ji said, there's a total of 3 including you. However, there's another one coming soon. By then, there'll be 4. 4. Mo Yinchi was dumbstruck, and he turned around and left quite some time later. I'm going to Karaki Academy. Old man Ji glanced at Mo Yinchi. Do you not want the second half of sweeping staff technique? In the distance, Mo Yinchi stopped, and he turned around to look at old man Ji. Old man, great-grandpa, 1 academy, for students. Are you sure this academy has a future? Old man Ji said indifferently, you've already signed the application form for Tsanglan Academy. Even if you go to Karaki Academy now, they won't want you. Hearing this, Mo Yinchi pointed at old man Ji angrily. Old man, you're tricking me. Old man Ji shrugged. I didn't force you back then. You were the one who begged me to let you join Tsanglan Academy. Hearing this, Mo Yinchi was so angry that he almost vomited blood. You still have the nerve to say that? You said that Tsanglan Academy is about the same as Karaki Academy. It's about the same. Old man Ji said, they're both in the imperial capital, they're both academies. Is there a problem? Mo Yinchi was so angry that he almost breathed his last. This is what you call about the same? This is the difference between heaven and earth. If it wasn't for the fact that he couldn't win, he probably would have fought. At this moment, old man Ji flicked his finger, and a black scroll fell in front of Mo Yinchi. Mo Yinchi glanced at it, and in the next moment, his eyes lit up, and he hurriedly put the scroll away. Old man Ji pointed at the top of the mountain. Mo Yinchi was a little conflicted, and he glanced at the scroll in his hand. In the end, he sighed deeply, and then walked towards the top of the mountain reluctantly. However, when he passed by Yi Xian and Anlanxiu, he suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Let's fight after I finish practicing this second half. Yi Xian shrugged. Anytime. Fight? He liked it too. Not far away, old man Ji suddenly said, Kid, this is the imperial capital, you'd better keep a low profile. Mo Yinchi snorted coldly. Low profile? Old man, I'm so outstanding, do I need to keep a low profile? I'm not boasting, but in the entire imperial capital, is there anyone more outstanding than me? When he spoke up to hear, he glanced at the sky and spoke heroically. Isn't the number 1 genius of our Jiang kingdom that Anlanxiu? That was in the past. Now that I, Mo Yinchi, have risen, Anlanxiu is nothing. Just you wait, I'll beat her until she cries. Yi Xian had a rather strange expression on his face. Old man Ji shook his head. It's the first time I've seen someone court death like this. Mo Yinchi was just about to speak when a white afterimage suddenly appeared behind him. Mo Yinchi's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly turned around before smashing the iron rod in his hand down. Bang! Along with an explosion, Mo Yinchi's figure was blasted flying. In the next moment, the ground trembled violently, and then a strange scene appeared. A figure was smashing the ground incessantly while howling incessantly. Just like that, this continued for an entire 15 minutes before the figure finally stopped. It was Mo Yinchi. At this moment, Mo Yinchi was lying on the ground like a pile of mud, and his entire face was swollen like a pig's head. Anlanxiu gazed at Yi Xian. Accompany me for a walk? Brother Yi grinned. All right. The two of them walked side by side towards the nearby Xiao Dao. Mo Yinchi roared furiously from behind them. Just you wait. Just you wait. If I don't avenge her, then She's Anlanxiu. Old man Ji had suddenly appeared by Mo Yinchi's side. Mo Yinchi's voice stopped abruptly, and then his head tilted to the side in the blink of an eye. Old man Ji kicked Mo Yinchi. Don't play dead. Get up and continue roaring. What's in Lanxiu? Beat her until she cries. Mo Yinchi didn't move at all. Old man Ji didn't say anything else. He just pulled Mo Yinchi's leg up, and then he dragged Mo Yinchi up the mountain. On a certain Xiaodao, Yi Xian and Lanxiu were walking side by side. Lanxiu spoke in a light voice. I never expected that you would join Sung Lan Academy. Yi Xian fell silent. He also didn't expect that he would join Sung Lan Academy by a freak combination of factors. It could only be said that the affairs of the world were unpredictable. Lanxiu suddenly stopped. I'm leaving the state of Jiang. I'm here to bid farewell today. Leave the state of Jiang. Yi Xian turned to look at Lanxiu. Lanxiu looked straight at Yi Xian. I'm worried about you. Yi Xian shook his head. I don't understand. Lanxiu took a step forward. At this moment, she was very close to Yi Xian. Yi Xian could already clearly smell the faint fragrance from Lanxiu's body. Lanxiu looked straight at Yi Xian. Everyone has underestimated you. I might even have underestimated you. I don't know what kind of fortuitous encounter you had, nor do I know what your true trump card is. However, you make me feel a trace of danger. Saying that, she shook her head and smiled. In the entire state of Jiang, there are very few people who can make me feel a sense of danger. Moreover, this kind of danger is not the kind of danger under normal circumstances. Yi Xian fell silent. Lanxiu continued to walk forward while Yi Xian followed slowly. After a while, Lanxiu said softly, after I leave, there might not be anyone in the state of Jiang who can truly suppress you in the future. Moreover, your character is too impulsive and straightforward. I'm afraid that one day, the imperial capital will fall into chaos because of you. Saying that, she turned to look at Yi Xian. Promise me one thing. After I leave, if it's within your ability, take care of the state of Jiang. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. You might be thinking too highly of me. Lanxiu smiled lightly. You still haven't answered me. Yi Xian said in a deep voice, I promise you that in the future, I will do my best to help the state of Jiang. Do you know what I like about you? Lanxiu suddenly asked. Like me? Yi Xian was stunned, and his mind went blank. Lanxiu was also slightly stunned. She knew that she seemed to have misspoken. However, she didn't explain anything and only smiled before continuing to walk into the distance. Yi Xian was in a daze for a moment. Then he followed her slowly. For a time, the two of them didn't speak and just walked like that. After a while, Lanxiu stopped and took out a black jade pendant and handed it to Yi Xian. This is? Yi Xian was puzzled. Lanxiu said softly, in the north of the state of Jiang, which is also the location of Two World City, the forces on the mountain discovered a ruin left behind by a sword master. They've almost developed it, and they'll be able to enter it in a month at most. This is a certificate of qualification given to me by the higher-ups. With this jade pendant, I'm qualified to enter the ruin. To me, entering it doesn't have any special meaning. You're a swordsman, so it should be of great help to you. Moreover, that place is located in a volcanic area, and there might be something extremely hot underground. If you can obtain it, it should be of great help to your sister. However, you have to be careful. Besides the top 1 or 2 people from the state of Jiang, there will be some top geniuses from other countries going there as well. You can't underestimate them. Yi Xian pondered for a moment before he accepted the jade pendant. Lanxiu smiled lightly. Farewell. She walked into the distance after she finished speaking. Will we meet again? Yi Xian suddenly asked. Lanxiu stopped. My footsteps might be very fast. Yi Xian grinned. I'll surpass you. Lanxiu turned to glance at Yi Xian and smiled. Good luck. As soon as she finished speaking, she turned and disappeared at the end of the Xiaodao. Yi Xian looked at the beautiful figure in the distance for a long time before he returned to his senses. He flipped his left palm, and in it was the other jade pendant Lanxiu gave him. 2 jade pendants. Looking at the two jade pendants, Yi Xian suddenly smiled. This smile was a little silly. Since he was young, he and his sister depended on each other for survival. There were very few people who treated him well. Even if there were people who treated him well, they were mostly using him. But in Lanxiao was different. Yi Xian would never forget someone who treated him well for the rest of his life. A moment later, Yi Xian tightly grasped the two jade pendants, turned around and walked up the mountain. He kept smiling, a silly smile. P.S. Friends who haven't collected this book, please add it to your bookshelf. Thank you very much to some friends who went to other book review sections to promote this book, and pulled in many readers for this book. Thank you. Also thank you very much to the readers who have been tipping these 2 days. Touched. Thank you very much. Love you all. Chapter 41. Love? Yi Xian didn't know what love was, and he'd never loved in the past. All he knew was that he really liked being with Lanxiao. As for anything else, he'd never thought about it. Right at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly stopped moving because an old man was standing not too far away from him. It was Elder Ling who'd followed Lanxiao earlier. Yi Xian glanced at the old man but didn't say anything. Elder Ling sized up Yi Xian, and then he said in a low voice, "Old man Ling Xiao, one of the young Miss servants." "Missin?" asked Yi Xian. Elder Ling nodded. Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Is something the matter, senior?" Elder Ling said in a low voice, "Young Master Yi, what I'm about to say might offend you in any way. I hope you can forgive me." Yi Xian nodded. "Go ahead." Elder Ling said, "Even though the young miss is from the state of Jiang, you should be able to tell that her background isn't simple. To put it bluntly, the people she meets in the state of Jiang might only be able to look up to her in the future, and they might not even have the qualifications to look up to her. Do you understand what I mean?" Yi Xian nodded. "You're trying to tell me not to get close to her, right?" Elder Ling nodded. "I presume young Master Yi is extraordinary since the young miss thinks so highly of him. However, the young miss isn't just an incomparably monstrous genius, the power behind her is something that young Master Yi can't even imagine. If young Master Yi has any other thoughts about the young miss, then forgive me for being blunt, but young Master Yi might live a very, very tiring life, or even very, very miserable life, and the young miss might be implicated because of you." Yi Xian fell silent. Elder Ling glanced at Yi Xian. "Young Master Yi, please think about what I'm saying. Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, the space in front of him suddenly split open, and in the next moment, Elder Ling entered the spatial rift and vanished. Splitting open space. Only those who had reached the Nether Passage realm were capable of such a feat. Above the Qi-resisting realm was the Ascending realm, and above the Ascending realm was the Nether Passage realm. The other party was several realms higher than him, and this Nether Passage realm expert was just a servant. The other party was purposely displaying his strength in front of him. His intentions were very clear. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian slowly walked up the mountain. "Feeling pressured?" the mysterious woman suddenly asked. Yi Xian nodded. The mysterious woman continued, "The fire spirit within your younger sister can only last for a month at most. If you can't find a replacement in a month, then she'll be in great danger. Apart from that, the guy imprisoned on the second floor should be waking up soon. Once it awakens and you haven't found the Tao Law, you'll definitely die. If you die, your sister's fate might be even worse." Yi Xian took a deep breath. "I want to cultivate. I want to become stronger." With that, he quickened his pace. Becoming stronger was for his sister, for himself, for survival, and for the sake of pursuing what he wanted to pursue. It was like how people in the secular world couldn't talk about love without money. How could they talk about living comfortably? Many relationships were built on the foundation of money. Even though it wasn't absolute, most relationships were like that. In next to no time, Yi Xian returned to the storm hall, and his expression instantly changed when he arrived before it. In the distance, Yi Ling sat on the ground and cried incessantly. Mo Yunqi, who had a bloody nose and swollen face, was by Yi Ling's side. At this moment, Mo Yunqi was gesturing to Yi Ling while Yi Ling cried even more fiercely. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned ferocious when he saw this. How dare you bully my sister? As soon as he finished speaking, a sword silently condensed in his palm. In the next moment, a powerful pressure accompanied by a faint glow of the sword swept out from his body, and the weeds in front of him were instantly slashed apart by this imposing aura and glow of the sword. One sword to decide life and death. Mo Yunqi was dumbfounded when he saw Yi Xian suddenly going berserk. He was about to speak, but Yi Xian had already rushed towards him with the sword in hand. Mo Yunqi was horrified when he sensed the power of Yi Xian's sword. He didn't dare to take it head-on, so he hurriedly leaped over the wall to escape. However, as soon as he leaped over the wall, it was directly turned into powder. F***ck. Mo Yunqi's face twitched when he saw the wall behind him turn into powder. He hurriedly sped up and ran into the distance. Behind him, Yi Xian madly chased after him. Everywhere Yi Xian passed, there was a mess. In the main hall, seeing Yi Xian and Mo Yunqi disappear not far away, Yi Ling was stunned, and then she hurriedly ran over. When she ran outside the wall, Yi Xian and Mo Yunqi had already disappeared into the distance. She could only vaguely hear Mo Yunqi's panicked voice. Big brother. I didn't bully your sister, calm down. However, Mo Yunqi's voice was soon drowned out by the sound of the sword. Yi Ling was stunned. What if Big Brother hurts himself? After saying that, she hurriedly ran to Old Man Ji's courtyard. In the courtyard, Old Man Ji was lying on a recliner, with a wine gourd in his mouth, sleeping soundly. Yi Ling hugged Old Man Ji's arm and shook it vigorously, saying anxiously, Grandpa Ji, Big Brother is fighting with that guy. Quickly go and take a look. Old Man Ji did not move at all. He was drunk like a puddle of mud. Yi Ling had no choice but to run to Ji Anji's courtyard. Ji Anji glanced at Yi Ling, and Yi Ling's face was full of anxiety. Big sister Ji, Big Brother is fighting with that person. Do you want to persuade him? I'm afraid Big Brother will hurt himself. Ji Anji walked in front of Yi Ling. Do you know how to cook? Yi Ling nodded subconsciously. Ji Anji said, I'm hungry. Yi Ling. Behind the Kanglan Palace, other than a large number of abandoned buildings, there was a mountain range. At this moment, two figures were running wildly in a dense forest in this mountain range. The one in the lead was Mo Yunqi. Above his feet, there were two whirlwinds. With the support of these two whirlwinds, his speed was like a gust of wind, extremely fast. And behind him, there was Yi Xian holding the Ling Shao sword in his hand. At this moment, Yi Xian's body was filled with a ruthless aura. Everywhere he passed, the flowers, plants, and trees were basically cut down. After running for about an hour, Mo Yunqi chose to fight with Yi Xian head-on. However, when Yi Xian used one sword decides life and death, he decisively chose to escape. This was because his iron rod, before it could even get close to Yi Xian's sword, it was directly cut into pieces by Yi Xian's Ling Shao sword light. It was directly cut into pieces. He could not fight. Mo Yunqi ran madly into the depths of the forest, and behind him, Yi Xian chased closely. Just like that, one person ran, the other chased, from night to dawn. At dawn, Missouri Yunqi ran back to the front of the Kanglan Palace. As soon as he stopped, Yi Xian appeared behind him. Yi Xian was about to make a move, but Yi Ling, who had been waiting in front of the stone steps all night, hurriedly ran over and hugged Yi Xian. Brother, are you okay? He didn't hurt you, right? Not far away, Mo Yunqi, who was lying on the ground and gasping for breath, heard Yi Ling's words, and he was so angry that he almost breathed his last. At this moment, when he saw Yi Ling, Yi Xian also became slightly more normal. He gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. Are you okay? Yi Ling hurriedly shook his head. I'm fine. Yi Xian glanced at Imo Yinchi, who was lying on the ground not far away. The latter's expression changed greatly, and he was extremely vigilant. You, don't mess around. I didn't bully your sister. You ask her yourself. Yi Xian withdrew his gaze, and he looked at Yi Ling. What happened before? Yi Ling slightly lowered her head, and did not speak. What happened? Yi Xian asked softly. Yi Ling softly said, I just remembered the time when I was with brother in the Yi family. At that time, brother picked up a bun, and he could not bear to eat it, so he gave it to me. Because of this, brother almost starved to death. As she spoke, tears began to flow down her cheeks. Yi Xian gently hugged Yi Ling. Silly girl, the past is the past. Brother will definitely not let you suffer in the future. Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian tightly. Brother can't suffer too much, okay? Yi Xian grinned. Okay, let's try our best to live a good life in the future, okay? Yi Ling raised her head, looked at Yi Xian, and smiled through her tears. Okay. Soon, Yi Ling fell asleep in Yi Xian's arms. After Yi Xian carried Yi Ling back to the room, he came to the front of the Kanglan Palace, and sat not far away from Mo Yinchi. Mo Yinchi had a vigilant look on his face. Yi Xian took out a wine gourd, and threw it to Mo Yinchi. Sorry. Mo Yinchi glanced at Yi Xian, picked up the wine gourd, and took a big gulp, and then said, What's the name of the sword technique you used just now? One sword to decide life and death. Yi Xian replied. Mo Yinchi nodded. Very strong, I couldn't block it. Yi Xian glanced at Mo Yinchi. There were 2 whirlwinds under your feet, was that a martial technique? Mo Yinchi nodded. 10,000 miles wind chasing technique, mystic lower grade. As he spoke, he laid down on the stone steps. If it wasn't for this martial technique, I would have been killed by your sword just now. Yi Xian also laid down on the stone steps. He held his head with both hands, and looked at the distant horizon. Sorry. Mo Yinchi shook his head. It's also my fault. I saw your sister crying, so I teased her, and said that you were beaten up by me, so she cried even harder. Yi Xian. At this moment, at the end of their sight, a bald man was walking towards them. The man was about 18 or 19 years old, bald, and extremely burly. He was bigger than Mo Yinchi and Yi Xian, and he didn't wear any clothes on his upper body, and his muscles were bulging, looking quite terrifying. There were some bones hanging on the man's neck, and some of the bones were still stained with blood. Mo Yinchi said softly, This guy should be our other student. As he spoke, he turned to look at Yi Xian. Beat him up? Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said, You first? Mo Yinchi shrugged. Let's go. As he spoke, he tapped his right foot lightly, and his whole body directly floated out, extremely elegant, and extremely fast. This speed made Yi Xian feel ashamed of his inferiority. Very quickly, Mo Yinchi appeared in front of the bald man, and he directly swept his foot towards the bald man's shoulder. The bald man didn't dodge, nor did he dodge. Bang! As a muffled sound rang out, Mo Yinchi was directly pushed back several feet, and his right foot was unceasingly trembling, while the bald man didn't move at all. The bald man looked at Mo Yinchi with an unfriendly expression. Mo Yinchi's expression changed slightly, and he turned to look at Yi Xian, who was not far away. Let's go together. Yi Xian walked in front of the bald man, and the bald man was somewhat on guard, but at this moment, Yi Xian suddenly cupped his fists. Zhanglan Academy, welcome. Mo Yinchi looked at Yi Xian in shock. You, the bald man cupped his fists towards Yi Xian. Thank you. As he spoke, he turned to look at Mo Yinchi, who was not far away. Mo Yinchi smiled awkwardly. It's a misunderstanding, a complete misunderstanding. The bald man suddenly rushed towards Mo Yinchi, and Mo Yinchi's expression changed greatly, and he turned to run. Yi Xian, you bastard, you sold me out. Chapter 42. Soon, Mo Yinchi's wails could be heard from the mountain. Noon, inside the Azure Wave Palace. Old Man Ji sat at the head of the table. He drank wine from time to time and was still drunk. On his left was Ji Anji, who held a pair of chopsticks and slowly licked them. On Old Man Ji's right was the bald man. The bald man held a string of iron beads in his hand. The iron beads were very smooth and shone with a faint light. Obviously, they were not made of ordinary materials. Below the bald man was Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi looked really miserable. His nose was bruised and his face was swollen. There were many footprints on his body. And the bald man sitting not far from him looked at him from time to time with an unfriendly expression. At this moment, a fragrant smell wafted over. Old Man Ji opened his eyes. Ji Anji immediately sat up straight and held the long chopsticks in his hand, ready to go. Yi Xian and Yi Ling each carried a plate over. Yi Xian carried a plate of roasted chicken. It was golden yellow and looked very tempting. Yi Ling carried a steamed fish. It looked very appetizing. The siblings had just placed the plate on the table when Old Man Ji and Ji Anji started eating. The speed was so fast that it shocked the bald man and Mo Yunqi. Not to mention them, even Yi Xian and Yi Ling were stunned. Old Man Ji was fine, but Ji Anji's eating speed could be described as a bandit. In less than 10 breaths, the roasted chicken in front of Ji Anji was only left with the bones and the fish was only left with the bones. The bald man and Mo Yunqi at the side were dumbfounded, and they had just picked up their chopsticks. Old Man Ji glanced at Ji Anji. Be more reserved. Ji Anji licked his chopsticks and looked at Yi Xian. Is there more? Everyone, after a long time, the Azure Wave Palace quietened down. Everyone sat around the table. There were 7 or 8 plates on the table, all clean. The bald man and Mo Yunqi looked like they had nothing left to live for, because they had only eaten a few mouthfuls. Yi Xian and his sister, Yi Ling, looked at each other and smiled. They were already full when they were in the kitchen. At this time, Old Man Ji suddenly said, "Let me introduce you to the newcomer." As he spoke, he pointed at the bald man. Bai Zhe, from Mount Mang in the north. He has a half-demon body. The bald man called Bai Zhe stood up and bowed slightly to the crowd. However, he cast an unfriendly glance at Mo Yunqi. The corners of Mo Yunqi's mouth twitched, and he glared fiercely at Yi Xian, who was not far away. Yi Xian was speechless. At this time, Old Man Ji pointed at Mo Yunqi. Mo Yunqi comes from Mo Town at the border of the extreme south. He has a light and agile physique, and if he cultivates speed-type martial techniques, he will be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort. He is good at using sticks and throwing knives. Flying daggers. Yi Xian glanced at Mo Yunqi. This guy was hiding something. Mo Yunqi suddenly pointed at Yi Xian. Old man, tell me about him. Old Man Ji glanced at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, from Qingqingzi family. He is a swordsman. Great swordsman. Great swordsman. Ji Anji and the bald man glanced at Yi Xian, and there was a trace of surprise and curiosity in their eyes. Great swordsman. This was rare in the entire country of Jiang, especially for such a young great swordsman. Yi Xian, at this time, Mo Yunqi suddenly stood up. He looked at Yi Xian in shock. Big brother, you can't be that trash that Kuraki Academy doesn't want, right? You're the trash. Yi Ling suddenly glared at Mo Yunqi. I won't cook for you in the future. At the side, Bai Zhe nodded. Don't let him eat. Mo Yunqi's face twitched. He gently fanned his cheeks and smiled. Little sister, I misspoke. Don't be angry, he finally understood. In this Tsanglan Academy, only this pair of siblings knew how to cook. If they didn't cook, he could only eat grass in the future. Yi Ling coldly snorted and didn't say anything. Old Man Ji suddenly said. He is the Yi Xian from the imperial capital. The Yi Xian from the imperial capital. Under Kuraki Academy's deliberate propaganda, Yi Xian's reputation in the imperial capital was very big. Of course, it wasn't a good reputation. Mo Yinchi sized up Yi Xian and shook his head. TSK, Kuraki Academy is really awesome. They don't even want someone like you. Since when did Kuraki Academy have such high requirements? Yi Xian smiled and didn't say anything. Old Man Ji suddenly said. In the back mountain, there is a martial arts hall. It used to be a place for Tsanglan Academy students to study. You can go there and have a look. Maybe you will gain something. Do you have martial arts? Mo Yinchi quickly asked. Cultivation methods are fine too. Old Man Ji shook his head. Why? Mo Yinchi was puzzled. Old Man Ji said calmly. I sold them for wine money. Everyone, Old Man Ji stood up. 1.5 years. There is still 1.5 years until the triennial death match between Tsanglan Academy and Kuraki Academy. I don't want your corpses to be hung on Tsang Mountain's Xiaodao in 1.5 years. Also, don't go out and wander around. If Kuraki Academy students see you, they will definitely beat you up. After saying that, he turned and left. Ji Anji suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. Go and make something to eat. Yi Xian, an hour later, after Yi Anji had eaten her fill, she stood up. Let me give you a friendly reminder. Kuraki Academy has 2 peerless geniuses, 1 male and 1 female. The male is called Fenju and the female is called Beichen. These 2 are not even 20 years old, but they have already reached the ascendant realm. They might even be half a step into the ethereal opening realm. Let me put it this way. In the entire country of Jiang, there is only one person who can suppress them. You should know who this person is. The few people present naturally knew who this person was. Besides Enlanxiu, who else could it be? Ji Anji said again. Besides these 2, there are 3 other geniuses under them. The identities of these 3 people are unknown. We only know that each of them has a special ability. Rumor has it that if the 3 of them join forces, they can even fight against Enlanxiu. At this time, Mo Yinchi raised his right hand and said weakly, is it too late to quit now? Ji Anji glanced at Mo Yinchi. It's not too late to commit suicide now. Sigh. Mo Yinchi laid on the table and sighed deeply. I've been screwed over by this geezer. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly said, since everyone is here, I have something to discuss with all of you. Everyone looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I looked it up earlier. Our academy lacks a lot of daily necessities. For example, we don't even have normal necessities. There are also some other things like toilet paper. In short, we lack everything. Oh my God. Mo Yinchi howled with grief while his head lay on the table, and he had a helpless expression on his face. Yi Xian glanced at them. I've decided to go down the mountain to buy some daily necessities. However, I don't have enough money. All of you should contribute some as well. Let's pool our resources together. Everyone was speechless. When he saw Ji Anji and the others remain silent, Yi Xian shrugged. It's fine if all of you don't contribute. We'll live our own lives from now on. That's fine, right? The corners of Mo Yinchi and the others' mouths twitched. Live our own lives? Eat grass in the future? A moment later, Bei Zhe took out a bag and handed it to Yi Xian. 20 gold coins. Yi Xian didn't stand on ceremony and kept it. Then, he looked at Ji Anji. The latter just stared at Yi Xian, causing Yi Xian's scalp to go numb. A moment later, Yi Xian waved his hand. All right. You don't need to contribute anymore. Go do what you need to do. Ji Anji turned around and left without any hesitation. Yi Xian turned to look at Mo Yinchi. Just like Ji Anji, Mo Yinchi also looked at him. Just like that. Yi Xian suddenly slammed the table and shouted angrily, "What are you looking at? Hurry up and pay up. Otherwise, eat grass." Mo Yinshi was speechless. An hour later, Yi Xian brought his sister down the mountain. To their left and right were Mo Yinshi and Bei Zhe. They had bought quite a lot of things this time. He and his sister, Yi Ling, definitely couldn't bring so many things, so he dragged Mo Yinshi and Bei Zhe along. Along the way, Yi Ling was lively and very happy. Looking at Yi Ling, Yi Xian's eyes were slightly worried, because the fire spirit had temporarily suppressed the coldness in Yi Ling's body. The fire spirit could last for 2 or 3 months at most. If there was no new replacement after 2 or 3 months, thinking up to there, he took out the black jade pendant and Lanxiu had given him. The Two World Mountains, the Sword Master's dwelling. "I have to go myself," Yi Xian said softly. On Yi Xian's left, Mo Yinshi had a weed in his mouth and was humming an unknown tune. He seemed rather sloppy. On Yi Xian's right, Bei Zhe walked with his head lowered. He was very silent, or rather, he basically didn't speak at all. At this moment, Mo Yinshi suddenly said, "Speaking of which, are the two of you confident in a year and a half?" Yi Xian patted Mo Yinshi's shoulder gently. "What's there to be afraid of? Just do it." Mo Yinshi gave Yi Xian a thumbs up. "Big brother, you make it sound so easy. The problem is, can we win? If we can't, we'll be killed and our corpses will be hung on Song Mountain's Shao Dao." Yi Xian spread his hands. "You don't want to do it? Then what should we do? Kneel and beg for mercy at Kuraki Academy?" Mo Yinshi sighed softly. "It's all my fault for being blinded by greed and believing old man Ji's words. I was tricked here by him. Sigh, it's all tears." At this point, he seemed to have thought of something, and he turned to look at Bei Zhe. "Big guy, how did you get tricked here?" Yi Xian also looked at Bei Zhe. He really wanted to know how Bei Zhe got tricked here. Under normal circumstances, no one would be willing to come here. Bei Zhe hesitated for a moment, and then he said, "Old man Ji said that my bones are amazing, that I'm naturally intelligent, and that I'm a 1 in a million martial arts prodigy. He said that the peace of the state of Jiang will depend on me in the future." Yi Xian and Mo Yinshi were stunned on the spot. After a moment, Mo Yinshi gulped, and then he said, "You believe him?" Bei Zhe glanced at Yi Xian and nodded, "I believe him." Yi Xian, you're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.